You're now listening to Bound to the Mafia Don, authored by Triple G. Introduction. 15 years ago, under a blood-red Sicilian sunset, two shots rang out across the olive groves. Isabella Costa, investigative journalist and mother of two, collapsed to the ground with crimson blossoming across her blouse. The man holding the gun was a startled-looking Dante Marchetti, barely 19 and trembling. His father, Alessandro Marchetti, reigning head of the Marchetti crime family, stood behind him, a hand on Dante's shoulder as if guiding the barrel toward Isabella's heart. Luca Costa, 10 years old, peeked from a distant hiding spot, tears streaming down his cheeks. He saw only the flash of the muzzle, the spurt of blood, and his mother's body going limp. Valentina Costa, 13 at the time, had been away orchestrating a petty con at the local market. She'd told Luca to wait by the stall for her, but he'd grown restless and returned to the villa on his own, just in time to witness the worst moment of his life. When Valentina arrived, all she found was a patch of dried blood in the dirt, and her brother alone, hysterical, claiming Dante Marchetti had murdered their mother. But everything was not as it seemed. Dante's hands shook with more than fear. Guilt clouded his eyes. What no one else knew was that Alessandro Marchetti had forced Dante into this act as a test of loyalty. Dante had rigged the gun with blanks and staged the shooting with Isabella's cooperation. Under Alessandro's controlling, brutal rule, father and son had clashed often, and Dante had begun hatching his own rebellious plans. Isabella Costa's intrepid reporting on human trafficking networks, and her theft of a certain relic that contained damning encrypted data, had put her life in jeopardy. By killing Isabella, Dante bought time. Alessandro believed his son had proved himself, while in truth, Isabella was spirited away to a hidden safe house in Sicily with Dante's covert assistance. That single act placed Dante on a dangerous path, to destroy the Marchetti syndicate from within. Valentina and Luca grew up believing their mother was dead. They were tossed into foster care when the authorities found them wandering, traumatized, days later. Valentina became a cunning con artist, vowing to avenge Isabella's death once she learned of the Marchetti name. Luca eventually followed a darker road, forging alliances with criminals, including the very man who had once pretended to kill their mother. None of them knew the entire truth. Not then. 15 years later, their lives converge again, each wearing a mask of secrets. Dante is no longer a scared boy but the new head of the Marchetti syndicate. Valentina, now called V, stands on the brink of infiltrating his empire. Luca lurks in the shadows, resentful and ambitious. And Isabella Costa, hidden away in a crumbling Sicilian villa, guards the relic's horrifying truth. When all the players return to the stage, loyalty and treachery become indistinguishable. Because once you enter a world of lies, no one escapes unscathed. Here. Chapter 1. Valentina Vite Costa sat at the corner of a dingy bar in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, sipping top-shelf whiskey she'd convinced the bartender to pour for free. The neon glow of vodka advertisements cast sickly hues across the scratched countertop. She wore a tattered leather jacket that deliberately clashed with the sleek glint in her green eyes. She wanted to be noticed, but only by the right people. A Russian arms dealer known as Nikolai the Bear Sokolov was seated in the back booth, flanked by two bodyguards. V had spent weeks setting up this moment. The plan was risky. She had to get sold as a debt payment to Dante Marchetti. The rumor was that Nikolai owed the Marchetti syndicate a significant sum, and Dante would accept a human asset as collateral if the asset was valuable enough. V intended to make herself appear priceless. Step 1. Erode Nikolai's confidence. She'd conned his associate out of $50,000 by posing as a distressed heiress with just enough real intel about the Marchettis to pique interest. She'd accidentally dropped a hint that she was a world-class forger. Nikolai seized the bait. Step 2. Offer herself as a bargaining chip. Under the pretense of fear, she told Nikolai she was in trouble. She owed money to another organization and needed quick cash. But her cunning eyes hinted that she might be worth more to him alive than the mere funds. 15 minutes into their meeting, Nikolai made his move. "You say you are good with your hands," he scoffed in heavily accented English. "Forging passports, forging art. Let me see. V produced a small painting from her satchel, a Renaissance-style portrait she'd faked in her teens. Look at the brushstrokes. The layering. You won't find a better hand in the city. The big Russian eyed it with mild interest, but his skepticism remained. And if I buy your debt, then what? She sipped her whiskey. You don't just get a forger. You get a cunning mind. I speak 4 languages, can charm my way into any room. Think of me as a multi-purpose tool. She paused, letting him imagine the possibilities. And if you pay off the right people, you can sell me to whomever you like. Someone who values my skill set more than you. Intrigue sparkled in Nikolai's eyes. This was exactly what she wanted. He rubbed his chin. The Marchettis might be interested. Dante Marchetti, especially, is always looking for new assets. V feigned a tremor of fear. I'd rather not fall into Dante's hands, she lied, eyes wide. He's dangerous. Nikolai grinned, revealing gold-capped teeth. Good. People pay more for fear. He swirled his vodka. I have a debt to settle with Dante. You, my dear, might just be the perfect currency. Her heart pounded, but she forced a demure smile. She had succeeded. In 48 hours she would be on Dante Marchetti's doorstep, delivered like a lamb to the slaughter. Only she was no lamb, she was the wolf, seeking vengeance for her mother. Nikolai signaled for his men. Take her. We'll make the arrangements with the Marchettis. A bodyguard grabbed her arm, but V didn't resist. She glanced down at the scuffed tabletop, allowing a small triumphant smirk to bloom where no one could see. For 15 years she had honed her craft as a con artist. Now the culmination of every scheme, every deception had arrived. She was going straight into the lion's den. As they led her away, she recalled Luca's face when he'd first mentioned the Marchetti name. V had spent her youth building up a reservoir of hatred toward the entire family. In her mind, they were responsible for her mother's death, for all the heartbreak that had followed. They don't know who they're dealing with, she thought. But they will. Dante Marchetti, 34 years old and already legendary in the underworld, pressed his fingertip against a crisp folder in his dimly lit penthouse office. Overhead lights glowed warm against the polished mahogany desk, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was tall, lean, with sharp cheekbones and perpetually cool gray eyes that many said could see right through a person's soul. Across from him stood Gabriel, the syndicate's young tech genius, who fidgeted with a pen. Gabriel had compiled the newly arrived intel on a mysterious woman, Valentina Costa. The folder contained everything from her last known addresses to security footage of her at various upscale clubs. A single photograph clipped to the front showed a striking woman with jet black hair, wide green eyes, and a seductive smirk. This is the woman Sokolov wants to trade? Dante asked, voice calm yet carrying an underlying current of authority. Gabriel nodded. Yes, boss. She's apparently a highly skilled forger and con artist. Fluent in several languages, has moved between different criminal circles. Though she stays under the radar most of the time. Dante glanced down at the photograph again. A subtle tension rippled in the muscles of his left hand, causing the faint tremor he despised. It was the same tremor that had developed after that long-ago shooting in Sicily, an involuntary tic he'd never fully shaken. I've heard the name Costa before, Dante murmured, intentionally vague. The truth, known only to a select few, was that Valentina was Isabella Costa's daughter. And Isabella? Dante's jaw tensed. The guilt he carried was deep and ever-present. He wondered if Valentina recognized the name Marchetti, if she knew the truth, or at least the partial truth as the world believed it. He rose from his desk, crossing to the window. Rain pelted the glass, city lights below shimmering like distant stars. Sokolov owes us $500,000+ interest on weapons shipments. He wants to trade a living, breathing human for that. Gabriel cleared his throat. She's presumably worth far more to him. He's certain you'll accept. Because he's heard I collect talents, Dante said flatly. People with unique skills who can help dismantle my father's old empire. He paused, letting the thought linger. There's something else here, Gabriel. Sokolov's never this forthright. Why is he so eager to offload her? Gabriel hesitated. There's a rumor that she set him up. Ran a con on his associate for $50,000. But Sokolov claims she's too good to kill, He'd rather profit by selling her to you. Dante's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. Greed is predictable. But let's humor him. Arrange the meeting. If I find her interesting, we'll take her in lieu of payment. Gabriel scribbled a note, then hesitated again. One more thing, boss. Our contact says she goes by V. And she has a brother, Luca Costa. The same Luca who's been feeding us intel on certain families. Dante's gaze sharpened, eyes flicking to the reflection of his own face in the glass. Luca never mentioned a sister to me. That means either he's hiding something or she's a wild card. He pivoted back to the desk, pressing both palms against the polished surface. We'll accept. Let Sokolov believe we're buying her. But keep the guards on high alert. Something tells me Valentina Costa has an agenda, and I intend to find out exactly what it is. As Gabriel left, Dante opened the file again, scanning details of Valentina's life, her cunning, her rumored seductions, the glint of intelligence in her eyes. A memory tugged at him. Isabella Costa's defiant stare the night he'd fired those blanks to save her life. Valentina Costa, Dante murmured, fingertips resting on the photo. Let's see what game you're playing. And let's see if you understand the consequences of stepping onto my board. Outside, thunder rumbled, echoing the tension in Dante's chest. He closed the folder and switched off the desk lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Soon, he thought, we'll see who's truly in control. Chapter 3. The deal went down at a disused dock in Queens near the East River. Sodium floodlights cast harsh shadows across stacked shipping containers. V stood with her wrists bound in front of her, flanked by Sokolov's two hulking bodyguards. Her face remained impassive despite the tightening clamp of plastic zip ties. Dante arrived in a sleek black SUV, accompanied by two of his own enforcers. The moment he stepped out, V noted his presence. The quiet authority, the flicker of something guarded in his gray eyes. She had expected a brash, arrogant mafia kingpin. Instead, he was refined, cold, and incredibly sharp. Sokolov, posture tense, greeted Dante with a polite nod. I trust you'll find the arrangement acceptable? Dante circled V slowly, eyes studying her from head to toe. She feigned trembling, letting him believe she was frightened. In truth, she was analyzing every detail. The gun bulge at his hip, the tailored suit that spoke of wealth and subtle taste, the faint tremor in his left hand. She wondered if it was from an old injury or a deeper internal conflict. His voice finally cut through the silence. You propose that I accept this woman as payment for your debt. Sokolov cleared his throat. She's talented, valuable. A forger, a polyglot. She can infiltrate places my men cannot. Surely worth $500,000 in your eyes. Dante studied V's face. Slowly, he reached out and caught her chin between his thumb and forefinger, tilting her head up. Tell me, Valentina Costa, do you believe you're worth that sum? She didn't dare break character. I can be worth twice as much to the right person, she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. A flicker of amusement danced across Dante's features, then vanished. Fine, he said, turning to Sokolov. We have a deal. Money and ledgers exchanged hands. In a matter of minutes, she was shoved into Dante's SUV. They drove off into the city night, leaving Sokolov behind with a satisfied grin. But V's heart was pounding for an entirely different reason. She was one step closer to the heart of the Marchetti empire. Within hours, she found herself at an ornate courthouse with Dante by her side. The rush was dizzying. She hadn't expected him to formalize her captivity so quickly. Her mind spun as a justice of the peace recited bland legal terms. Was it truly possible he intended to marry her right now? As if sensing her shock, Dante leaned in. I don't keep hostages, he murmured, voice low. I keep partners, or I keep corpses. If you belong to me, we do this properly. V's eyes widened. This was beyond the usual mafia transaction. He was chaining her to him through marriage, albeit one of convenience. She forced a nervous nod as though she had no choice, but inside she marveled at his audacity. The ceremony was brief, sterile. No white dress, no flowers, just the echo of footsteps in the nearly empty hallway. Dante signed the papers with sure strokes of his pen. V signed with a hand that she made tremble, feigning reluctance. The officiant offered them curt congratulations, leaving them alone for a moment. He turned to Dante. What do I call you now? Husband. Her voice dripped sarcasm. He gave a chilly half-smile. Only if you want to keep up appearances. But in private we both know what this arrangement really is. He escorted her to a waiting car. V's heart hammered, but not with the usual excitement of a con. Something about the swirl of Dante's gray eyes threatened to unbalance her carefully laid plans. That night, they arrived at a luxurious townhouse on the Upper East Side, just one of the Marchetti properties. Guards posted at the entrance parted for them. Dante led her upstairs, away from curious onlookers, to a grand suite that looked more like a museum exhibit than a bedroom. He stood in the doorway, arms folded across his chest. "Welcome, Signora Marchetti. Make yourself at home." She bristled at the name. "So that's it? I'm your wife just like that." His expression remained impassive. "It's safer for both of us this way. You'll learn. And if you try to run..." She cut him off. "You'll kill me, I know." A charged silence fell between them. V felt a sense of vertigo, as though she was stepping onto a ledge with no safety net below. Infiltrating the Marchetti family was always the plan, but she hadn't anticipated how quickly Dante would tighten his hold. She met his gaze, determined to maintain her composure. "You underestimate me, Dante." Something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like respect. "I'm counting on that, amore." With that he closed the door, leaving her in the palatial suite with her thoughts spinning in 1,000 directions. Chapter 4. A week passed. V learned to navigate the townhouse, flanked by guards at nearly every turn. She also noticed that Dante had an entire private floor where he conducted business. An office, a library, and a hidden vault rumored to hold incriminating evidence on rivals and allies alike. That vault became her primary obsession. Despite their sham marriage, Dante and V maintained an uneasy truce in public. She wore the Marchetti name like a costume, smiling at the occasional dinner he hosted for political allies. Dante never tried to consummate the marriage. He treated her more like a business partner under tight surveillance, inviting her to conversations she suspected were tests of loyalty. During one such evening, Dante escorted her into his library. The space boasted floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with ancient tomes in Latin and Greek. A single painting hung on the far wall, an oil portrait of a stern man with the Marchetti family's hawk-like nose. Likely Dante's father, Alessandro. Dante's voice broke the silence. "You can read Italian fluently, yes? Perhaps you'll find something interesting here." He gestured to the books. She forced a polite smile. "I'm sure I will." Her eyes wandered across the spines of philosophy texts, some with Dante's handwritten notes stuffed between pages. A man who used to be a professor, so the rumors said, before he took the reins of the syndicate. He watched her carefully, as though gauging her reaction to the library's contents. "Knowledge is power," he said softly, echoing an old adage. V offered no response. She focused on the side wall, where she'd heard rumor of a hidden panel leading to a vault. She was here to find a relic, an artifact rumored to have belonged to her mother. The significance, she suspected, was more than sentimental. It held an encryption key that could topple entire trafficking networks. In the next moment, Dante moved to a large wooden cabinet. Inputting a code into a discrete keypad, he unlocked a hidden compartment. V's pulse quickened. This could be the vault she'd heard about. But her excitement sank when she saw only a small gun safe. He retrieved a 9mm pistol, checking the chamber with practiced ease. "I assume you know how to use one of these." She nodded. "Better than you might think." "Good," he said, handing it to her. "You'll come with me to a meeting tonight. Show me how you handle yourself if things turn sour." V suppressed her disappointment. The Real vault lay elsewhere, perhaps behind the false bookcase or in the basement. She took the gun, hooking it into the holster he offered. "Where are we going?" He smirked. "A warehouse by the docks. I'm meeting an associate to finalize a new shipment route." Before they left, V saw him input a second code near the bookcase. It clicked, the faintest mechanical sound emanating from behind the shelves, then stopped. He seemed to notice her curiosity, and his smirk deepened. "If you're good, maybe I'll show you my real collection someday." Her heart pounded. He knew exactly what she was after, or at least suspected. She offered a nonchalant shrug, but inside, adrenaline coursed through her. The game was intensifying. That night, as they prepared to leave, V caught a glimpse of the interior courtyard below. Guards patrolled the perimeter. She realized how precarious her situation was. She needed to find the relic hidden somewhere within Dante's world, but he was no fool. Worse, something about him, his calm intelligence, the flickers of remorse in his eyes, made her question the simplistic revenge narrative she'd fed herself. But she forced those doubts aside. He was a Marchetti, and the Marchettis had destroyed her family. She wouldn't forget that. Chapter 5. An unexpected visitor arrived the following afternoon. Luca Costa, wearing a sleek designer jacket and a smug smile that made V's stomach churn with equal parts relief and fury. She told him to stay away until she could secure the relic, but apparently he had other plans. Dante's staff showed Luca into a plush sitting room, gilded mirrors reflecting the tense reunion. V stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, while Dante leaned against the wall, observing. "Sorella," Luca said, opening his arms as if expecting a warm hug. V eyed him coldly. "What are you doing here, Luca?" He placed a hand dramatically against his chest. "Visiting my dear sister, obviously. I had to see how you were settling in with Mr. Marchetti." Dante's expression was unreadable, but V sensed his curiosity. This was the first time he'd encountered Luca face to face since the so-called wedding. She wondered if Dante would hint at their existing alliance or keep it secret for now. Luca, ignoring the tension, strolled around the room, admiring the opulent decor. "Nice place, Dante. Must be worth a fortune." "Several," Dante said coolly. "You two have a lot to catch up on, I'm sure. I'll leave you to it." Before exiting, Dante gave Luca a pointed look, then turned to V. "I'll be in my study if you need me." As soon as he was gone, V whirled on her brother. "Have you lost your mind? Showing up unannounced?" Luca shrugged nonchalantly. "Relax, cara sorella. The big boss and I are on good terms. I help him with certain business ventures. He's not going to kill me just for stopping by." She narrowed her eyes. "You never said you were working directly with Dante." "Technically, I'm a freelancer. I feed intel that helps him destabilize certain rival families. In exchange, I get nice payouts." A ripple of apprehension tightened V's chest. Her entire infiltration hinged on a single assumption: that Luca was naive enough to let her take the lead, to let her be the brains behind retrieving the relic. But now it appeared Luca was forging his own connections. That was dangerous, especially if Dante found out her infiltration had less to do with forging for him and more to do with stealing from him. Luca crossed his arms, studying V. "What's the progress on the relic?" She clenched her jaw. "I'm working on it. Dante's not exactly giving me free rein to explore his secrets. That's why I'm here," Luca said, lowering his voice. "There's an upcoming masquerade auction at the Metropolitan Museum. High-end black market deals happen behind the scenes. Rumor is Dante might reveal or trade something big, possibly that relic. Keep your ears open." Her gaze flicked to the door, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "What do you know about Mom's death, Luca? You never told me exactly what you saw." His lips twitched, an old wound reopening. "I saw Dante shoot her. That's all there is to it. The bastard is responsible. So do me a favor, don't get too close to him. Get the relic, get revenge, and get out." V's heart pounded. Hearing it stated so plainly reignited the rage she'd nurtured for years. "I won't let him slip away unpunished." A smirk tugged at Luca's mouth. "Good. Because if you do, I'll do it myself." Before she could respond, Dante reappeared in the doorway. His eyes flickered between them. "I trust you've said your hellos and goodbyes." Luca smiled thinly, turning to leave. "Always a pleasure, Dante." He paused by V, leaning in to whisper, "Keep me posted, Sorella. Don't let him win." Then he was gone, leaving behind a tension so thick V could barely breathe. Dante exhaled, stepping closer to her. "Your brother. An interesting character." She forced a smile. "We have a complicated past." "I can see that." His gaze was calculating, as though deciphering a puzzle. "Be careful. He may not be who you think he is." V tried to laugh it off, but the warning sank deep. Because she wasn't who Dante thought she was either, and soon the truth would unravel them all. Chapter 6. V decided it was time to accelerate her plan. She knew Dante was shrewd, possibly aware of her intentions. But if he suspected she was after something specific, an artifact, a relic, he hadn't shown his hand. She needed a bold move to force him to reveal it. That night she slipped into Dante's bedroom unannounced. He was sitting in an armchair, reading under a soft lamp. The subdued light highlighted the sharp angle of his jaw and the focus in his gray eyes. Without a word, V let the silk robe she wore slide off her shoulders, revealing a slinky black slip beneath. Dante's gaze flicked up, cool and discerning. To what do I owe this surprise? She shrugged, feigning nonchalance. We're married, aren't we? I thought I'd visit my husband. A faint smirk curved his lips. How dutiful of you. Stepping closer, she placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. She could feel the corded tension in his muscles. Despite her best attempts, a thrill of nerves zigzagged through her. Dante was an enigma. His eyes were half-lidded, but behind them a calculating mind was undoubtedly at work. She leaned in, brushing her lips against his ear. You don't have to pretend you're immune to me. He inhaled a slow, measured breath. I don't pretend anything, amore. If I wanted you, you'd know. She eased into his lap, straddling him. Then show me. For a moment his reserve cracked. His hand found the small of her back, drawing her flush against him. Their mouths met, a clash of need and power. The taste of him was unexpectedly heady, stirring an odd sense of both attraction and foreboding. But V kept her focus. She'd planted a discreet listening device in the room earlier and was hoping to catch him off guard, glean any secrets he might whisper in a vulnerable moment. She reached around his neck, winding her fingers into his hair. You're so guarded, she murmured. Don't you ever get tired of carrying all those secrets? His response was a low hum against her lips. Secrets are currency in my world. You of all people should know that. Before she could press him further, he abruptly lifted her and set her aside. Rising to his feet, he adjusted his collar. As much as I enjoy your sudden attention, we both know this is a tactic. V blinked, feigning confusion. A tactic? He regarded her with maddening calm. You want me to let my guard down? You're searching for something. He paused, letting the silence weigh on them. Then he turned to a locked armoire nearby, opening it to reveal a small, ornate chest. Inside, nestled in velvet, was an antique Venetian mirror. V's heart jolted. Could this be the relic? Dante lifted it, letting the lamplight flicker across its gilded frame. You think you're the only one who can manipulate. But I'm not so easily undone, Valentina. He held out the mirror to her. She approached cautiously, feigning awe. What is it? A family heirloom, he lied smoothly. Rarely shown to outsiders, but I'm making an exception for my wife. She reached for it, fingertips brushing the cold metal. Her pulse kicked into overdrive. The frame was etched with tiny symbols. Ciphers, perhaps. This had to be the artifact her mother died for. But something about the craftsmanship felt off. The glass looked too pristine, the etchings too new. Dante snapped the chest shut, returning it to the armoire with precise care. Satisfied? She swallowed hard, forcing a smile. It's beautiful. He stepped back, eyes dancing with cruel amusement. Keep your curiosity in check. Something tells me you'll find more than you bargained for if you keep digging. Later that night, when she was alone, she examined the stolen photographs she'd snapped with her phone, close-ups of the mirror. Under a magnifying filter, the frame's inscriptions didn't match the rumored encryption key designs. It was a fake. Dante had played her. And he wasn't done yet. You're not the only thief here, amore, she recalled his near whisper as he walked away. Her entire body tensed. The game had just escalated. She would need a new strategy to secure the real relic. If Dante was even keeping it in the townhouse at all. Chapter 7. Valentina Costa sat on the edge of the king-sized bed in her private suite, phone in hand, staring at the high-resolution photos she'd managed to snap of the mirror's detailed frame. The encrypted markings were clearly off, sloppy forgery work if one had a practiced eye. Rage coiled in her stomach as she realized Dante had baited her with a counterfeit relic, then watched her swallow the lure. Soft morning light filtered through heavy drapes, illuminating the tension lining her face. She had to rethink her approach. Simply seducing Dante wouldn't grant her unfettered access. He was too cautious, too aware of her potential treachery. A sharp knock cut through her thoughts. Ravenna, a statuesque enforcer with ink-black hair and an unwavering glare, poked her head into V's room. Dante wants you in the study. V hid her phone under a pillow and forced a neutral expression. Right. I'll be there. Ravenna's eyes flicked over V's form, lingering with open disdain. Don't keep him waiting. It was no secret Ravenna detested V. The woman had served as Dante's bodyguard and occasional lover for years, and V's sudden arrival, complete with a wedding ring, made Ravenna's position precarious. The tension between them was palpable. V followed Ravenna down the winding staircase, each step echoing against marble floors. She mentally prepared herself. Dante might confront her about the near break-in at the vault or hint that he knew she'd discovered the mirror was fake. She stepped into the study. Dante stood by a large antique globe, swirling a glass of water in one hand. No liquor this early, V mused. That alone was a statement of his discipline. You summoned? V asked, adopting an air of aloofness. Dante's gray eyes flicked over her. Close the door. When she complied, he set down his glass. I trust you slept well. Her heart hammered. As well as I can in a house guarded like a fortress. He ignored the dig. We have a masquerade auction at the Metropolitan Museum tomorrow night. You'll accompany me. A flicker of triumph lit V's chest. Luca had mentioned this very event. This could be her chance to locate the real relic if Dante intended to parade it among high-rolling criminals. She tilted her head, playing coy. You want me there as your wife? Or your newest lackey? Dante's gaze hardened. I want you there to listen. Eavesdrop. Observe who's bidding on what. Learn which items are fakes, which are real. Your eye for detail will serve us both. V crossed her arms. And in return? He stepped closer, voice low. In return, I won't send you back to Sokolov in pieces. Do you really think I haven't figured out that you orchestrated your sale to me? His next words were laced with quiet menace. I know exactly who you are, Valentina Costa. And I suspect I know why you want something from me. But you won't find it unless you cooperate. Her pulse thundered, but she forced a cocky smirk. So it's blackmail? You're going to make me your reluctant partner? Dante set his glass on the desk. Reluctant or not, you are my partner now. V squared her shoulders, refusing to let him see her fear. She needed to maintain the upper hand, or at least the illusion of it. Fine. I'll do as you say. But if I find out you're lying to me... He gave a short, humorless laugh. Lies are the currency of this entire business, amore. If you want to survive, you'll learn to trade in them just as deftly as I do. She bristled at the mocking endearment. Without waiting for his dismissal, she turned on her heel and strode toward the door. As she left, Dante's voice followed her. We're something memorable. We'll make a lasting impression. That evening, in the privacy of her suite, V dialed Luca, half expecting him not to answer. He picked up on the third ring, his tone impatient. What? We need to talk, she said quietly, pacing across the plush carpet. Dante knows a lot more than I realized. Tomorrow night is the masquerade at the Met. You said the relic might be traded there. I need to confirm if that's true. Luca sighed into the receiver. I don't know if the real relic is going on display. But I do know there's some hush-hush item the Marchettis are planning to flaunt. If that's our target, get your hands on it. She hesitated. And if it turns out to be another fake? Then we adapt, he said sharply. We can't afford mistakes, Sorella. We're running out of time. Either Dante leads us to the relic or we find another way. V swallowed. Right. He cut her off. Don't get squeamish on me, Valentina. You wanted revenge. Remember that. She winced at the bitterness in his voice. I remember, she said and hung up. Staring at her reflection in the dressing table mirror, V thought of the fake Venetian mirror Dante had shown her. She thought of her mother's memory, of Luca's simmering resentment. The lines between truth and falsehood were blurring. No matter what doubts whispered at the edges of her mind, she had to stay the course. She would attend that auction, corner Dante into revealing the relic's whereabouts, and bring down the Marchetti empire from within. Even if it destroyed her in the process. Chapter 8. Thunder clapped outside Dante's penthouse as he slumped in his leather armchair, eyes shut against the flicker of lightning. Whenever a storm rolled in, the past clawed its way back into his thoughts. He let out a shaky breath. Sleep would be elusive tonight, he felt it in his bones. A single lamp cast warm light over a worn journal on the nearby table. The cover read lecture notes on moral philosophy. It was all that remained of his life before Alessandro Marchetti dragged him back from university into the family business. Dante flipped it open, scanning old scribbles about ethics, about the weight of guilt and the possibility of atonement. A grim smile played on his lips. How ironic that he was now deeply entrenched in the exact kind of moral cesspool he once critiqued in lecture halls. He closed his eyes, letting the memory flood in, unbidden but unstoppable. Sicily 15 years ago. Dante was 19, standing under a blistering sun in an olive grove. Sweat trickled down his collar, but the iron grip of his father's hand on his shoulder chilled him. Alessandro Marchetti loomed behind him, wolfish smile curving his lips as he thrust a handgun into Dante's palm. In front of them knelt Isabella Costa, trembling but defiant. She had uncovered evidence linking the Marchetti empire to a massive human trafficking operation, and Alessandro had decided to handle the problem. But he wanted Dante to pull the trigger, a test of loyalty. "You do this, son," Alessandro growled, "or you'll wish you had." Dante stared at Isabella. She was more composed than he could believe, her eyes burning with righteous fury. He could hardly breathe. This wasn't a business transaction. This was murder. That was when he made his fateful choice. With a burst of reckless resolve, Dante faked the kill. He had rigged the gun with blanks, and Isabella had a small pack of stage blood concealed beneath her shirt. In a moment of orchestrated drama, the shot rang out, red splattering across the dusty ground. Isabella collapsed, eyes rolling back. Alessandro barked a laugh, praising Dante for finally showing the killer instinct. But Dante's insides roiled with horror as he crouched beside Isabella. Even though he knew it was staged, her pale face and trembling body made his stomach twist. He whispered one final instruction: "Run. Don't ever look back." She gave him the faintest nod. Later that night, Dante smuggled her to a hidden safe house, out of Alessandro's reach. For years he wrestled with guilt. He had saved her life, yes, but only by feigning compliance in his father's brutal world. He didn't know what became of her children Valentina and Luca, left behind in the aftermath. But the look on Isabella's face haunted him, a strange blend of gratitude and heartbreak. Gratitude for sparing her. Heartbreak for all that was lost. Present day. A rumble of thunder shook the windows, snapping Dante out of the past. He opened his eyes to find Sofia Marchetti, his mother, wheeling herself into the room in her motorized chair. Her once regal posture had wilted with time and pain shadowed her eyes, yet the strength in her voice remained. "Dante," she said quietly. "Still brooding in the dark?" He forced a weary smile. "Just remembering." Sofia guided her chair closer, her gaze gentle but firm. "You can't resurrect the dead by drowning in guilt. What happened happened. And you did your best to save that woman." His heart twisted. "But did I really save her? She spent 15 years in hiding, separated from her children. And all because I never followed through on destroying the syndicate sooner." Sofia's thin hands gripped the armrests. "You're doing more than your father ever did. You've begun dismantling the family empire from within. Funding charities, diverting money to help trafficking survivors. It's a slow war. But it's one you're fighting." He turned toward the window, watching rain streak down the glass. "And now her daughter is here in my home. Valentina Costa, driven by hatred for the Marchettis. She doesn't know you saved her mother," Sofia pointed out softly. Lightning flashed, illuminating Dante's conflicted expression. "No. And it would be suicidal to tell her the truth without proving it first. She came for revenge, but she's stuck in a web of lies. Do you trust her?" He let out a mirthless chuckle. "No. She's a con artist. Brilliant, cunning. But there's something else. Some spark in her. She's not just a thief. She's carrying secrets that are heavier than she realizes." Sofia regarded him carefully. "Perhaps she is the partner you need in all of this. The one who can break the cycle of violence if she learns the truth." He paced across the rug, unsettled by the idea. "She might kill me if she learns the real story before I can prove my intentions. Or worse, if she thinks I'm lying about what happened to her mother." Sofia nodded gravely. "Then show her. At the right time, reveal what truly transpired. If you want to atone, you can't keep her in the dark." Dante exhaled. "First the auction. Then I'll see if she's ready to understand that I'm not her enemy." His mother's eyes shone with lingering hope. "Just be careful. Valentina is not the only Costa we must worry about. Luca is a wild card, and not nearly as principled as his sister." At that, Dante's jaw tightened. Luca's double dealings were known to him, though the young man likely thought he was pulling the strings. Luca's ambition and greed could destroy everything before Dante had a chance to bring the truth to light. Sophia slowly turned her chair toward the door. "I'll leave you to your preparations, my son." Then she paused. "And Dante, whatever happens, remember that you have a good heart. Don't let your father's shadow consume you." He remained silent, staring at the storm-lashed skyline. Guilt still coiled inside him, but a new determination hardened his resolve. He would see his plan through, expose the family's darkest secrets and free the captives, both literal and metaphorical. For Isabella's sake and possibly for Valentina's as well. But first he had to survive this masquerade auction and the battle of wits unfolding between him and the woman who wanted him dead. Chapter 9. Two black SUVs pulled up in front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, their tinted windows reflecting the grand, columned facade. The Masquerade Gala was officially a charity fundraiser, but anyone in the know understood that, behind the scenes, illicit deals for priceless artifacts and black market goods would take place. V stepped out first, clad in a form-fitting emerald gown that left her shoulders bare. A delicate mask, feathers and filigree, obscured the upper half of her face, framing her green eyes to glitter like polished jade. Dante emerged next, his suit a deep charcoal accented by a silver half-mask that accentuated his sculpted cheekbones. He offered her his arm. "Shall we?" She linked her arm through his, hyper-aware of the stares they drew. The world saw them as a striking couple, Mr. and Mrs. Marchetti, an aura of menace and allure hovering around them. V kept her posture poised, though adrenaline thrummed in her veins. They made their way through the museum's grand entrance, crystal chandeliers illuminating the marble floors. Champagne flutes circulated on silver trays. Music from a string quartet drifted across the crowd. Everywhere V looked, she saw wealth and power exchanging secret smiles. A few hours into the event, Dante guided V through an ornately carved doorway that led to a private wing. Here the real business happened. Hush-hush auctions for special items. Guards in black suits stood at intervals, alert and impassive. V scanned the faces. Art dealers, mafia dons, corrupt politicians and traffickers, men and women who thrived on the shadows society preferred to ignore. She forced herself to remain calm, reminding herself that she'd seen uglier corners of humanity before. Dante leaned down to whisper in her ear, the warmth of his breath sending a shiver down her spine. "Keep your eyes open. Anything that stands out, let me know." They approached a display on a raised platform, a small jade figurine from the Ming dynasty. The official story was that it was being donated for charity. The real story, whispered among the crowd, was that it had been stolen from a Chinese museum a month ago. Beside it, a glass case displayed an antique cameo brooch rumored to belong to a Romanov duchess. Fakes, V noted instantly. The brushstrokes and metalwork told a different story than the provenance claimed. Minutes later, an auctioneer took the stage, brandishing a gavel. The hush that fell over the crowd was electric. Bids started flying for each illicit treasure. V felt Dante's gaze on her as she studied the items. She recognized forgeries, some more convincing than others, being sold at prices that would make the average billionaire blush. Then came the final piece of the evening's lineup, a gorgeously framed Venetian mirror from the 17th century. V's heart jumped into her throat, though she kept her face impassive behind the mask. A ripple of chatter swept through the onlookers as the curtain lifted to reveal the artifact. The host extolled its virtues: exquisite craftsmanship, rumored ties to the House of Medici, and whisperings of secret codes inscribed in the frame. V glanced sharply at Dante. He offered no reaction, his expression unreadable behind the silver mask. She studied the mirror from a distance, similar to the fake he'd shown her, yet not identical. This one had deeper patina on the frame and more complex filigree. Could this be the genuine relic? Suddenly, a slender man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped forward to examine the mirror. V recognized him. Luca, also masked, but the shape of his jaw and the cocky tilt of his head were unmistakable. Her eyes narrowed. Here. And Dante must have known. For all her cunning, she felt cornered in a game that was expanding beyond her control. The bidding began, climbing rapidly into the millions. V felt Dante's hand tighten around her waist. She couldn't tell if it was a possessive gesture or a warning. Possibly both. Unexpectedly, Dante raised his hand, placing a bid far higher than the rest. Whispers broke out in the crowd. Luca's head snapped in their direction, his eyes locking with V's. A flicker of betrayal or challenge, she wasn't sure which, crossed his face before he stormed out of the room. The gavel struck. Sold to Mr. Marchetti. A smattering of applause followed. The moment the crowd dispersed, Dante escorted V into a side corridor. She turned on him, pulse racing. "You knew Luca was going to be here." He shrugged. "Of course. He has his own network. Did you see his face when I placed that bid?" V glared. "He's furious. He thinks." Dante cut her off. "He thinks we outplayed him. Which in truth we did. Now shall we see if the mirror is genuine?" Moments later, the mirror was brought to a private antechamber, guarded by Ravenna and two of Dante's enforcers. V walked around it, examining the frame's etchings, the glass's subtle warping that came with true vintage. Her hands trembled with anticipation. Her conclusion: this mirror was real, or at least a far more convincing piece than the cheap counterfeit. Yet something about the inscriptions looked incomplete, as though a portion of the cipher had been scraped off or obscured. Dante watched her closely. "Well," she mustered a steady voice, "it's closer to the real deal than the one you showed me. But I'm not convinced this is the relic you're hiding. Why buy it if you already own the real one?" A humorless half-smile. "Because I needed to test you and Luca. Also because sometimes illusions must be stacked to reveal the truth." V felt her frustration flare. "You talk in riddles, Dante. I want answers." He sighed, nodding to Ravenna. She and the others stepped out. Only V and Dante remained, the mirror looming between them like a silent judge. "You're right," he said quietly. "We should talk. But not here." She blinked. "Then where?" His phone chimed and he glanced at the screen. "We've been summoned to Venice on urgent business. A certain black market auction. Another mirror is rumored to be in play." V's eyes widened. "This is insane. How many of these mirrors are floating around?" He stepped closer, his voice a low murmur. "You tell me, Amore. You're the one who staged your own sale to me for a reason. Something to do with a relic your mother once possessed. Aren't you curious how many fakes have been circulating? Or why?" Her breath caught. "So you admit you know about my mother?" A shadow crossed Dante's face. "I know more than you realize. The question is, are you ready to hear it?" She stared at him, heart pounding. The entire foundation of her vendetta suddenly felt off balance. "Tell me." He shook his head. "Not here. Not yet. Prepare for Venice. Then we'll see if you can handle the truth." Before she could press him further, he turned and walked out, leaving her alone with the mirror, the alleged relic that might hold the key to unmasking decades of dark secrets. She touched the mirror's frame, her reflection warping in the aged glass. Somewhere within these swirling mysteries lay the truth about her mother. And if Dante truly knew more, she would drag it out of him no matter the cost. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about uncovering the real story behind everything she'd lost. Chapter 10. Less than 48 hours after the masquerade auction, Dante and V touched down in Venice on a private jet. They arrived under the cover of night, rain-soaked wind whipping across the tarmac. A sleek black sedan whisked them from Marco Polo Airport into the labyrinth of the city's canals, finally depositing them near a centuries-old palazzo that Dante used as a safe house. The palazzo's interior was a faded echo of Venetian grandeur. High ceilings adorned with chipped frescoes, marble floors cracked with age, and windows overlooking a canal where the tide whispered against stone walls. Gabriel and Ravenna were already stationed there, having flown in earlier to set up security measures. Dante wasted no time in briefing them. "There's a black market auction rumored for tomorrow night in an abandoned opera house, La Fenice Nuova. Word on the street is that someone plans to sell a certain Venetian mirror rumored to contain high-value information. Or at least a clue to it." V leaned against a wooden pillar. "Do we have any proof this is the same relic we're hunting?" Gabriel shrugged, tapping on his tablet. "Anonymous chatter on the dark web suggests it might be the real deal, complete with encryption markings. But it could also be another fake. Hard to verify." V's jaw tightened. They were chasing illusions, but she had to keep pressing forward. If even one of these mirrors turned out to be the real relic tied to her mother's past, she needed to see it for herself. Dante glanced at V, then at Ravenna. We'll scout the opera house tonight, ensure we know every entrance and exit. No one moves without my say. Ravenna nodded, though V caught the woman's barely concealed irritation at receiving orders in front of the wife. V suspected Ravenna would love to see her fail. She squared her shoulders, determined not to show any weakness. Later, close to midnight, Dante and V slipped through Venice's narrow alleys and winding bridges on foot, accompanied by Ravenna and 2 armed men. The moon was a pale orb behind a shroud of mist, and the water lapped against the canal walls in ominous rhythm. They reached the abandoned opera house, a grand building with boarded windows and a locked front gate. Silence reigned, broken only by the soft splash of a distant gondola. Ravenna motioned for the men to check the perimeter while she pried open a side entrance with surprising finesse. Inside, dusty aisles and tattered velvet seats stretched toward a crumbling stage. Broken chandeliers dangled precariously from the ceiling. It was a place of ghosts, echoing with the remnants of aria and applause from a bygone era. Dante's flashlight beams swept across the darkness. "They'll likely set up the auction in the main auditorium," he said, voice echoing. "Plenty of space, easy to corral potential buyers." V followed him down a row of seats, her eyes darting to every shadow. Where would they keep the items before bidding starts? Ravenna pointed toward a backstage area. "Storage rooms, dressing rooms. Lots of hidden corners. We should check it out." They split into pairs. Dante and V took the left side while Ravenna and the guards took the right. Dust swirled in their flashlight beams as they navigated backstage corridors. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, as though the opera house itself mourned its lost splendor. Then came a loud crash from somewhere in the darkness. Dante held up a hand for silence, stepping cautiously toward the noise. V's pulse spiked, but she forced steady breaths, gripping the small pistol in her coat pocket. A moment later, Ravenna's voice hissed through Dante's earpiece. "We've got company, armed men. Possibly local criminals or a rival faction. 2 of my guys are pinned down." Dante's face hardened. He nodded at V, then pressed a button on the earpiece mic. "Fall back to the main auditorium. We'll regroup there." They sprinted through the hallway, footsteps echoing on cracked tiles. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks that reverberated in the old building. Fear clawed at V's chest, but adrenaline drove her forward. Rounding a corner into the main hall, they found Ravenna crouched behind a toppled row of seats, exchanging fire with 3 masked assailants who'd positioned themselves on a makeshift balcony. Dante immediately fired 2 shots, forcing the men to duck. V spotted one man creeping along the upper walkway, trying to flank them. Without hesitation, she fired a clean shot at the walkway's wooden support beam, causing it to collapse in a shower of debris. Chaos erupted. The masked men scrambled for new positions while Ravenna's guards returned fire from across the aisle. Out of nowhere, V felt an arm wrap around her waist, yanking her backward into the gloom. She gasped, struggling, but her assailant was shockingly strong, pressing a pistol to her temple. "Drop the weapon," he snarled in Italian. Instinct kicked in. V stomped on his foot, pivoting her hips to break his hold. She slammed her elbow into his ribs, causing him to grunt in pain. The pistol loosened in his grip and she wrenched herself free, spinning around with her own gun raised. 2 shots rang out, one from her, one from across the hall. The assailant collapsed, bullet through his shoulder. Dante rushed over, breathing hard. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, adrenaline surging. "No, I'm fine. Let's end this." Within minutes, the remaining attackers fled, leaving behind their wounded. The cavernous silence returned, now marred by the reek of gunpowder and dust. Ravenna was nursing a grazed arm, but otherwise their team was intact. Dante, scanning the aftermath, clenched his jaw. "We need to leave before more show up. Someone clearly knew we'd come here tonight." Ravenna spat blood onto the floor, eyes blazing. This was an ambush. Could be a rival family, or maybe local thugs looking to score an easy kill. V's mind churned. Or maybe Luca, she thought, though she kept it to herself. He had the means and motive to disrupt their search. Dante gestured toward the exit. "Let's move. We'll regroup at the palazzo." They retreated, helping Ravenna's men gather up the wounded. Once outside, they dispersed into the narrow back streets, avoiding any routes that might be under surveillance. In the quiet confines of the palazzo's main hall, Gabriel anxiously waited. When Dante V and Ravenna stumbled in, battered and dust-covered, Gabriel's eyes widened. "What happened?" he asked. "A welcoming committee," Dante replied icily, removing his coat to reveal a tear in the sleeve. "We can assume tomorrow's auction is definitely real enough to draw dangerous attention." V couldn't shake the chill of being ambushed in the dark. "We need a better plan," she said, voice taut. "Whoever's behind this isn't going to stop at one failed attack." Dante met her gaze. "Agreed. But we press on. If the real relic is going up for sale, it'll be there tomorrow night and we can't walk away now." Their eyes locked, unspoken tension crackling. V swallowed the urge to demand more answers. She'd nearly been shot tonight. And for what? A chance at uncovering the truth behind a relic that might still be a myth? But Dante's resolve was unwavering. "We'll finish this," he said, a hint of finality in his tone. V nodded, even as questions raged in her mind. Who ambushed them? Was Luca behind it? And if they found the Real mirror tomorrow, would Dante finally reveal what he knew about her mother? With no immediate answers, she could only steel herself for whatever came next. In the world of illusions they inhabited, truth came at a high price, and it was a price she was prepared to pay. Chapter 11. 2 hours before dawn, V found herself unable to sleep. The palazzo's corridors were dark and silent, the only sound a gentle lapping of canal water through open windows. She wandered aimlessly until she stumbled upon a small courtyard at the palazzo's center, an overgrown garden with a stone fountain gone dry. There she found Dante hunched on a crumbling bench, his suit jacket off and shirt stained with dust. He looked weary, a subtle tremor in his left hand as he lit a cigarette. The glow briefly illuminated the hard planes of his face. Despite her better judgment, V stepped forward. "Smoking kills, you know," she said, voice hushed to avoid echoing in the courtyard. He snorted softly, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "So does everything else in this business." She sank onto the bench beside him, tension thrumming. They were alone. No guards, no Ravenna, just the intimate hush of night. For a moment neither spoke. She tried to reconcile the conflicting emotions inside her. Part of her hated him for what his father's syndicate had done to her family, yet another part recognized his tortured streak, the same guilt that drove her own quest. After a long silence, Dante broke it. "You handled yourself well tonight. You saved my life back there." He glanced down at the scuffed ground. "Thank you." She shrugged, attempting nonchalance. "I was saving my own skin. You just happened to be attached." He let out a quiet chuckle. "Fair enough." Her gaze lingered on the faint tremor in his hand. "Your hand shakes sometimes," she noted, gentler than she intended. He froze, cigarette perched between his lips. Slowly he removed it. "It's an old injury." She arched an eyebrow. "Doesn't look like a physical injury." His voice dropped. "It's psychological. A reminder of the first time I pulled a trigger." She stiffened, mind flashing to the rumor that he'd shot her mother. "Is that what you're guilty about?" she asked, voice trembling with suppressed anger. "Your first kill?" Silence stretched long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, voice haunted. "When I was 19, my father forced me to kill someone. Or so he believed. I've lived with that ever since." Her chest tightened, conflicting desires warring inside her. She wanted to lash out, to scream that he'd murdered her mother. Yet something in his tone made her pause. Could there be more to the story? Before she could press him further, they heard footsteps. Ravenna appeared in the archway, arms crossed. "Dante, we have an update. Gabriel's got intel on who ambushed us." Dante stubbed out his cigarette, expression cooling. "Let's go." V followed, heart pounding at the missed opportunity. Yet a kernel of doubt had lodged itself in her mind, refusing to vanish. In a dusty chamber turned makeshift command center, Gabriel sat at a laptop, Ravenna looming behind him. The screen displayed a flurry of photos and dossiers. Gabriel pointed to one grainy security snapshot, a figure resembling Luca, leaving a side entrance of the opera house moments before the ambush. Cameras caught this silhouette. "The facial recognition is inconclusive, but it's likely Luca Costa," Gabriel explained. "He must have brokered a deal with local muscle to hit us." V's stomach twisted. Dante's gaze flicked her way, sharp with unspoken questions. She lifted her chin, defiant. "I had nothing to do with that. Luca didn't even tell me he'd be in Venice." Ravenna snorted. Sure he didn't. Heat flared in V's cheeks. Believe what you want, but I'm not suicidal. If I planned that ambush, I wouldn't have nearly gotten myself killed. Gabriel cleared his throat, gesturing to the screen again. We also have intel that Luca is involved in the other auction that's happening tomorrow night. Word is they're selling a mirror with rumored encryption data. Might be the real relic. Dante's jaw set. Then it's time we confront him directly. Ravenna smirked. Straight to the point. I like it. They devised a strategy. Dante and V would pose as interested buyers at the clandestine auction, while Ravenna and Gabriel orchestrated a backup team to ensure no repeat ambush. The plan was to intercept the mirror before Luca sold it to the highest bidder, if indeed it was the real relic. As the final details were hashed out, V found her mind drifting to the conversation with Dante in the courtyard. His words, his regret. Could the man who'd supposedly murdered her mother be harboring a secret? She recalled Luca's account. He'd been only 10, traumatized seeing their mother shot. But memories could be distorted, especially in children. What if Dante's father had orchestrated something more complicated that day? Oh, he shook off the thought. She couldn't afford to trust Dante. Not yet. The only thing that mattered now was securing that relic, and surviving long enough to use it. After the meeting, Ravenna cornered V in the corridor. So you're Dante's new confidant now? She drawled, sarcasm dripping from every word. Enjoying a heart-to-heart in the courtyard? V tensed. I'm just as trapped in this as you are, Ravenna. The assassin's dark eyes flickered with scorn. You think I'm trapped? I've been with Dante for years, long before he married you. I know him better than anyone. And trust me, you're not special. V refused to be intimidated. I don't need to be special. I just need to succeed. A bitter laugh escaped Ravenna's lips. You won't. People who get close to the Marchettis always end up dead or wishing they were. V held her gaze. That might be your fate, but not mine. Ravenna's hand twitched near the knife at her belt. For a moment, V thought the woman might actually draw it. But then Ravenna turned on her heel and stalked away. Stay out of my path, she snapped. V let out a shaky breath. She was surrounded by dangers. Dante's complicated motivations, Luca's betrayal, Ravenna's hostility, and the looming question of who truly killed her mother. No matter how cunning she was, she couldn't predict every twist. She only knew that by tomorrow night, either she or Luca would claim the relic. And in doing so, she'd be one step closer to the truth, whatever terrifying shape it took. If the worst happened, she'd confront it like she always had. Alone, unflinching, ready to con the very devil if she must. Chapter 12. The day of the auction dawned cloudy and cold, Venice's lagoon veiled in a mist that felt strangely prophetic. V spent the morning pacing the palazzo's library, restless energy crackling through her. She adjusted a concealed thigh holster beneath her elegant black dress, a risky but necessary addition. If Luca had orchestrated the previous ambush, there was no telling what he'd attempt next. Mid-afternoon, Dante summoned her. He stood in a second-floor gallery, staring at a large oil painting depicting the myth of Medusa. Serpents coiled in the woman's hair, her anguished face locked in perpetual fury. Dante's posture was stiff, his voice quiet. We need to talk before tonight's chaos. V moved closer. A swirl of dust motes drifted in the beam of weak sunlight. Then talk. He exhaled slowly. There's something you need to know about your mother. Her heart lurched. What about her? He didn't meet her eyes, gaze fixed on the painting's haunting details. You believe the Marchettis murdered her. And it's true my father intended to. But I never finished that job. Her throat tightened. What do you mean? Dante finally turned to face her, a shadow of anguish in his gray eyes. I faked her death, blanks in the gun, staged blood. It was the only way to convince my father I'd proven my loyalty. Then I helped her escape. She's been in hiding ever since. Emotions crashed through V in dizzying waves. Hope, disbelief, fury. You expect me to believe that after all these years? That you saved my mother? I did. His voice cracked, the faint tremor returning to his left hand. I regretted every minute that she had to stay hidden. But there was no other choice if she wanted to live. Tears stung V's eyes. She shook her head, grappling with the scope of his claim. Why didn't she come for us, me and Luca? She tried, Dante said quietly. But my father still had resources everywhere. Reuniting with you would have painted a target on all of you. She made the painful choice to remain in the shadows until it was safe. A storm of conflicting thoughts churned in V's mind. Could her mother be alive? She recalled Luca's certainty he'd seen the murder. But Luca was only 10 at the time, traumatized. The memory could be half-formed or manipulated by Alessandro's men. And what if Dante was lying right now to manipulate her further? Her voice trembled. Where is she? Dante looked away. Sicily. She's not well. The years on the run took a toll. She asked me to keep her location secret. She doesn't trust anyone, maybe not even me. V's knees threatened to buckle. Why are you telling me this now? Why not before? Because if we secure the true relic tonight, we'll have enough leverage to finish dismantling my father's syndicate once and for all, Dante replied. That means your mother could finally come out of hiding, if that's what she wants. But she's afraid the relic's encryption might spark a larger war. V pressed a hand to her forehead. This is a lot. I know. He tentatively touched her arm. I don't expect forgiveness. I did what I could under impossible circumstances. Confusion warred with anger. She couldn't reconcile the image of the monstrous killer she'd imagined with the guilt-ridden man before her. I need proof, she said finally. Something that shows me she's really alive. Dante nodded. After tonight's auction, if we come out of this in one piece, I'll show you. I promise. She wrenched away from his touch, heart pounding. Don't make promises you can't keep. He let her go, watching as she hurried off. The revelation had torn a gaping hole in the foundation of her vendetta. If her mother was alive, everything, her hatred, her need for vengeance, suddenly felt unmoored. In a private corner of the palazzo's courtyard, V pulled out her phone and dialed Luca with trembling fingers. After several rings, he answered, voice dripping with irritation. This better be important. She took a shaky breath. I spoke to Dante. Claims, Mom's alive, Luca. Silence on the other end, then a harsh laugh. He's lying. He's playing you. V bit her lip. But what if he's not? We were both kids when she died. Luca let out a sharp exhale. I saw her body, Valentina. Blood, no pulse. You think I'd forget that? Torn. V gripped the phone. Dante said he used blanks, that she faked the blood. It's possible you saw only what they wanted you to see. Rage crackled in Luca's tone. Are you so desperate to absolve him that you'd believe any story he spins? He's manipulating you. Don't let him twist your head around. Our mother is gone. V's eyes stung. But if there's a chance. He cut her off. Stop. Tonight I'm selling the real relic. If you want it, you'll have to outbid the rest. But you won't find me unprepared. The line went dead, leaving V trembling with a storm of doubts. She wanted to trust Luca. He was family, but he'd lied to her before. She wanted to believe Dante's confession, but it might be another elaborate ruse. Still, the fragment of hope that her mother might be alive glowed fiercely in her chest. If there was even a fraction of truth to Dante's words, she had to see for herself. Either Luca is right and this is all a mind game, she thought, or Dante just gave me the key to everything I've been searching for. Her path was set. Tonight she would stand by Dante's side at the auction, fight to claim the relic, and discover once and for all whether her mother still breathed. Though the swirling confusion threatened to swallow her, a single resolve remained. She would face the truth, even if it destroyed the last remnants of her old life. Chapter 13. Fog enshrouded the water taxi as it cut across the Venetian lagoon in early morning light. V stared at Dante from across the narrow aisle, her gaze simmering with unanswered questions. He had just told her that her mother was alive, hidden in Sicily under his protection. The revelation pulsed in her mind with every heartbeat. Her mother, Isabella, was not dead after all. Dante sat upright, tension in the firm line of his shoulders. Gabriel and Ravenna were absent, left behind to recon the aftermath of their near-fatal ambush. Now it was only V and Dante, forging a fragile truce as they sped toward Venice's small airport. A private plane awaited, bound for Palermo. I can't believe we're doing this, V muttered under her breath. She was still reeling from a conversation with her brother Luca, who insisted Dante was lying. Torn between blood loyalty and the faint glimmer of hope, she'd chosen to see for herself. Dante didn't reply until they disembarked at the airport. Once inside the sleek jet, he motioned for V to sit in a leather recliner across from him. The engines roared. As the plane lifted, V clenched the armrests, ignoring the jolt in her stomach. Finally, Dante broke the silence. I never asked you to trust me. But I wanted you to know the truth before everything else falls apart. She studied his face, shadows under his eyes, a flicker of that familiar tremor in his left hand. If my mother's truly alive, why does Luca believe he saw her die? Dante exhaled slowly. He was a terrified child. My father staged the scene meticulously, blood packs, blank rounds. It must have looked very real to a 10-year-old. By the time Luca realized he'd lost his mother, it was already too late to see the deception. V's throat tightened. Could the boy she once knew, small, quiet, haunted, have carried a false memory all these years? So my mother let us think she was dead? Dante flinched at the accusation in her tone. She never wanted that. I arranged her escape. After that, the threat of Alessandro Marchetti hunting her down was too great. She believed you and Luca were safer not knowing. V's chest constricted. Anger warred with relief and sorrow. What about now? Why bring me to her now? Because the relic you seek, once you see what it really unlocks, there's no going back. Isabella believes it could unleash catastrophe if it fell into the wrong hands. And with Luca planning to sell it, we don't have the luxury of time. Dante's gray eyes bore into hers. For once, V found no hint of deception, only quiet resolve and a heavy burden of guilt. All right, she whispered. Let's end this. Later in Sicily. The sun blazed over rolling green hills dotted with olive trees. Dante's private car wove through twisting roads until they arrived at a remote villa perched above the sea. The exterior was time-worn, peeling paint, vines crawling up cracked walls. A heavy sense of both decay and sanctuary hung in the air. V's heart pounded as Dante led her through a small courtyard into a spacious but sparsely furnished living room. There, in a high-backed chair by an open window, sat a woman. Her once dark hair was streaked with silver, her posture frail. And yet, when she turned, V saw a spark in her eyes. V, the woman breathed. Emotion swelled in V's throat. Mom. She took hesitant steps forward. The moment was surreal, like stepping into a dream or a memory long denied. Isabella rose, unsteady on her feet, tears brimming. They crossed the distance and fell into each other's arms, sobs tearing through the hush. V clutched her mother as though afraid to let go, inhaling the scent of lavender soap and sea air. You're alive, V whispered, voice trembling. Why didn't you tell us? Isabella pulled back, eyes red-rimmed. I thought it was the only way to protect you and Luca. Alessandro would have tracked me down otherwise, and any connection to you would have put you both at risk. Her voice wavered with regret. I never stopped wishing for a way to bring us together. V felt tears burn her own cheeks. So many years of bitterness and anger unraveling in a single moment. She glanced over her shoulder to see Dante at a respectful distance, hands clasped in front of him. He looked almost relieved. Dante helped me all those years ago, Isabella said. I owe him my life. V swallowed hard. Part of her wanted to cling to the hatred she'd carried for the Marchettis, but she could no longer deny the evidence standing before her. Her mother was alive. Dante had saved her. Yet the question of the relic loomed large. V forced herself to speak. Luca's about to sell the relic, the one you risked your life to hide. We think the next auction is happening soon in Palermo. He's calling it the real deal. At the mention of Luca's name, Isabella's face fell. He must be consumed by anger, he never forgave me. But you must understand, Figlia, that relic is more than an encryption key for money. It holds data exposing human traffickers worldwide, including political figures. V's stomach twisted. She'd known the relic was important but not the full extent. That's why the Marchettis wanted you silenced? Isabella nodded. Alessandro's entire empire was built on trafficking profits. That relic can topple not just the Marchettis but dozens of other crime syndicates, if used correctly. Or it can be sold to the highest bidder, which would bury the truth forever. A pulse of dread beat inside V. Luca's chasing a fortune, ignoring the moral cost. Dante finally approached, voice quiet. We have to stop him. If the relic goes to a powerful buyer, they'll fund new horrors. But if we leak the contents to Interpol, thousands of victims might be saved. V lifted her tear-streaked face to her mother's. So we destroy it, or we release the data? Isabella squeezed her hand. That choice is yours, Cara. I only know we can't let men like Alessandro, like Luca even, keep profiting from human lives. The weight of it pressed against V's ribcage. She thought she came here for vengeance. Now she stood at the crossroads of a far larger cause. Thunder clapped outside as though echoing their resolve. In the distance, the sky had darkened despite the Sicilian sun. A storm rolled in, quick and punishing. V turned to Dante. We'll stop Luca. And if leaking the data will bring down these monsters, then so be it. A flicker of relief crossed Dante's features. Agreed. Isabella's frail hand trembled on V's arm. Be careful. Luca won't go down without a fight. V's pulse pounded. She thought of her brother's angry voice on the phone. He's crossed the line and I'm done watching him self-destruct. Even as fear coiled in her belly, a fierce determination took hold. She glanced at Dante, recalling the depth of his guilt and his vow to dismantle his father's legacy. She had no illusions about the cost of what they were about to do. But for the first time, V felt she wasn't alone in this fight. She had a mother who'd risked everything, and a man who'd buried his own humanity to redeem others. And maybe, just maybe, they could face the chaos and come out with some semblance of victory. Tonight they would confront Luca, the relic, and the darkest secrets of the Marchetti syndicate. Chapter 14. A grand opera house in Palermo had been shuttered for years, its ornate facade now chipped and faded. But for one night, it came alive with a clandestine gathering. Expensive cars rolled up to the entrance, delivering underworld figures from Europe and beyond, each seeking a piece of Luca Costa's high-stakes offering. V and Dante arrived under the guise of a wealthy couple looking to invest in rare artifacts. Ravenna followed in a separate vehicle with Gabriel, providing backup. The tension in the air was palpable as they stepped into the dimly lit foyer. A hush fell over the crowd, then resumed in whispers when they recognized the Marchetti name. V's gaze swept across the shadowy corners, scanning for threats. She expected Luca to be lurking with armed men, but so far he was nowhere to be seen. The hush of hushed voices and the hush of fear rippled in the gloom. They made their way to the main hall, a once glorious auditorium now teeming with criminals dressed in finery. On stage, a hastily erected platform displayed a single object draped in black velvet, no doubt the prized relic. Armed guards in dark suits flanked the stage, eyes roving. Remember, Dante whispered, we're here to disrupt the sale, not just watch. Gabriel will jam external communications at the right moment. Ravenna will handle crowd control if things turn violent. V took a steadying breath. Luca's going to see right through our pretense. We need to move quickly. Dante nodded. We will. The lights dimmed, drawing everyone's attention to the stage. A lean figure in a tailored suit emerged from the wings. The overhead glow revealed Luca, his handsome features twisted in a self-satisfied grin. He surveyed the crowd with theatrical flair, arms open wide. Buonasera, ladies and gentlemen, Luca said, voice resonating through the hush. Welcome to this exclusive auction, where you'll have the chance to acquire something truly priceless. He gestured dramatically to the black drape, which an assistant removed, revealing a tall, gilt-framed Venetian mirror. Its surface was slightly tarnished, etched with cryptic symbols along the edges. V's chest tightened. It matched every description she'd gleaned about the genuine relic. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Luca's grin widened. According to legend, this mirror was created centuries ago to conceal hidden messages, information that could topple empires. Tonight it can be yours, for the right price. He launched into a practiced spiel, extolling the artifact's rarities, dropping hints about sensitive data. Though Luca never said the words trafficking ring or encrypted accounts, the subtext was loud and clear to those in the know. V felt Dante's hand brush hers, a signal. She tensed, ready for the next phase of their plan. But before they could move, Luca's eyes locked on them from the stage. He smirked, a dangerous glint. Well, he purred into the microphone. We have a distinguished guest tonight, Dante Marchetti, the son of the late Alessandro Marchetti, and his lovely wife. A hush fell across the audience. Clearly, Luca intended to unmask them before they could strike. V forced a cool smile and stepped forward, every nerve on edge. Luca, you always did crave an audience. He inclined his head mockingly. So good to see you, Sorella. Tell me, have you come to buy my treasure, or steal it? A few uneasy chuckles rippled. V answered in a sharp voice. Depends on the price. You said it was priceless. Does that mean we should skip the formalities? Luca made a theatrical show of looking between V and Dante. I'm open to negotiations. But first, let's allow our other esteemed guests the chance to bid. He gestured to a row of seats filled with oligarchs, mafia lords and crooked politicians. Several nodded, eyeing the mirror with predatory interest. Bidding opened with a staggering 7-figure sum. Numbers soared. V's heart pounded. The longer this went on, the more likely someone else might claim the relic. Dante leaned toward her, voice barely audible. We should make our move. But before they could, gunshots echoed from outside the auditorium doors. The crowd froze, startled. More shots followed, accompanied by shouts. Chaos erupted. Bodyguards scrambled, pulling weapons. Ravenna's voice crackled in Dante's earpiece. We have incoming rival syndicate, maybe, or local authorities on the take. They're attacking from the lobby. Luca cursed under his breath, clutching the microphone. Everyone remain calm, he barked, though panic rippled through the room. V saw their opening. She nodded at Dante, who sprinted toward the stage. She followed, weaving through the frantic throng. More gunfire rattled the chandeliers. Luca shoved the mirror's stand, nearly toppling it in an attempt to shield it. From backstage, a group of masked thugs barreled forward, clearly Luca's hired muscle. They opened fire indiscriminately, aiming to keep the crowd and V away from the mirror. A bullet shattered a row of seats near V. She ducked, returning fire with practiced precision. She managed to clip one guard, sending him sprawling. Another lunged at her. She sidestepped, driving an elbow into his jaw and finishing him with a shot to the leg. Dante, meanwhile, vaulted onto the stage and engaged Luca. They grappled for control of the relic, the frame nearly knocked to the floor. Luca threw a wild punch that Dante dodged, responding with a swift strike that caught Luca in the ribs. The microphone hit the ground with a squeal of feedback. Two more of Luca's men charged Dante, forcing him to relinquish the relic for a moment. The crowd was scattering, rushing for exits, some trying to grab valuables or slip away. Over the commotion, Ravenna's voice again crackled. Gabriel's jammed external comms, but more enemies keep coming. V dispatched another attacker, heart thundering. She spotted Dante pinned by two men while Luca grabbed the mirror, hoisting it off the platform. She sprinted to intercept him. Stay back, Sorella, Luca hissed, rummaging in his pocket for something. A small pistol glinted in his hand, aimed at the mirror's glass. If I can't sell it, maybe I'll just destroy it. V froze. The encryption data could still be extracted if the frame were intact, but if Luca shattered the glass, all that crucial intel could be lost. Or at least compromised. Think about what you're doing, she shouted, voice echoing amidst the pandemonium. Luca's eyes were wild. I'm done letting everyone else use me as a pawn. If I can't profit, no one can. Behind him, Dante broke free from his assailants and lunged. Luca squeezed the trigger, intent on firing at the mirror, but V tackled him, forcing the shot to go wide. The bullet ricocheted off the stage scaffolding. They sprawled to the floor, the mirror clattering beside them. V struggled against Luca's stronger build, but her fury fueled her. You sold me out, Luca, she spat, hooking his arm. You nearly got me killed in Venice. He shoved her back, rage contorting his features. You abandoned me years ago. I'm just returning the favor. Pain lanced her heart, but she gritted her teeth. I was a child too, Luca. I did what I could. Dante wrenched the mirror away, staggering to his feet. Gunfire continued in the background as Ravenna's men clashed with whoever was storming the building. The entire auction was devolving into a bloodbath. Luca scrambled up, eyes burning with hatred. You'll pay for taking my birthright. That was the instant Ravenna burst onto the stage, face streaked with sweat and dust. She leveled her gun at Luca. Drop your weapon. V glanced at Dante. The relic was secure, at least for the moment. Now came the confrontation that had been brewing for years, the unmasking of Luca's betrayal. But as if reading her thoughts, Luca snarled, "This isn't over." Then he leaped off the stage into the frenzied crowd, vanishing amid the swirling chaos. V's heart pounded. We have to stop him. But Dante grabbed her wrist. We can't chase him through this crossfire and risk losing the relic. We'll find him. For now, we have what we came for. In the distance, sirens wailed. The second wave of police, likely paid off by some criminal faction, was closing in. Dante and V exchanged a grim nod. Ravenna provided cover as they dashed backstage. The mirror's etched frame glimmered under the harsh overhead lights. They'd secured the relic, but Luca was out there wounded, angry, and still wielding dangerous connections. Tonight's carnage was just the beginning. Chapter 15. Outside the Opera House, rain pounded the deserted Palermo streets. Police cruisers, unmarked sedans, and black SUVs clogged the narrow alleyways, sirens clashing with the thunder above. The entire neighborhood felt under siege. Huddled behind crates in a side-loading bay, Dante and Ravenna caught their breath. Ravenna clutched a shoulder wound, blood seeping between her fingers. Her face was a mask of pain, but she stayed alert, scanning the darkness for threats. Gabriel's voice crackled over the earpiece. "I've got a van around the corner. I'll guide you, but the perimeter is swarming with local enforcers." Dante, cradling the heavy mirror under one arm, nodded. "We'll push through." Ravenna growled. "Let me go first. I can still shoot straight." V glanced at the mirror's tarnished surface, the cryptic etchings shimmering whenever lightning flashed. It felt like a living thing, heavy with the power to destroy or liberate countless lives. Her mind spun with the question, what do we do with it now? They bolted into the alley, weaving around stalled vehicles. Gunshots crackled from distant pockets of conflict. For every step forward, it seemed the storm overhead raged louder, as if nature itself convulsed at the night's violence. A pair of policemen spotted them, raising flashlights. For me. No time to confirm whether these cops were corrupt or just following orders. Ravenna fired 2 warning shots, forcing them to dive for cover. Dante and V kept moving, splashing through puddles, the mirror clutched protectively under Dante's coat. At last they reached a nondescript black van idling at the curb. Gabriel opened the side door, eyes wide with relief. "Get in." Inside, the smell of gunpowder and adrenaline was thick. Dante set the mirror on a seat, breathing hard. Ravenna collapsed on a bench, grimacing. "We have to see a medic. This bullet's lodged deep." Gabriel peeled away from the curb, tires screeching. "I've got a safe house 2 miles away, but it's not exactly a hospital." "It'll have to do," Dante said. V slid to the back, ignoring the pummeling rain that still slipped through the van's open side door. She hovered over the mirror, mind churning. They had it now. The alleged real relic. "Let me see," she murmured, turning on a dim overhead light. The etched symbols along the frame were mesmerizing, a puzzle made of swirling lines and archaic letters. She spotted hidden hinges near the top corner, suggesting a secret compartment in the frame, likely housing a digital storage device. Dante knelt beside her, his voice hushed. "We can extract the data once we're safe. That data can reveal the full scope of the trafficking network." V nodded, trying to ignore the throbbing pulse in her temple. "What about Luca?" Ravenna hissed from her seat. "He vanished in the chaos. Probably licking his wounds. We can track him later." A grim silence descended. They all knew this was far from over. 20 minutes later, the safe house. Gabriel's safe house turned out to be a modest apartment tucked above a bakery. The sweet smell of pastries clashed oddly with the metallic tang of blood as they dragged Ravenna inside, laying her on a wooden table. Dante tore at his own shirt to create makeshift bandages, while V rummaged for first aid supplies. Ravenna's face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead. "Don't fuss," she gritted out. "I've had worse." Dante pressed gauze to her wound, ignoring her protests. "Bullet grazed your shoulder, might be lodged under the muscle. You'll need a real doctor soon." As Gabriel helped stabilize her, V retreated to a side room with the mirror. She set it carefully on a sturdy table, flicking on a lone desk lamp. Her heart pounded with anticipation. If the encryption was here, everything her mother had fought for, and everything the Marchetti Empire had tried to bury, would be laid bare. Gently, she pried at the hidden latch she'd noticed in the van. It resisted at first, then popped open with a soft click. Inside was a small compartment lined with velvet, containing a wafer-thin piece of metal and circuitry, a sort of microchip or data card. She held it up to the light, breath-catching. "So this is it, the relic's key." Footsteps approached. Dante appeared, shutting the door behind him. His shirt was spattered with Ravenna's blood and tension etched lines across his brow. You found it, he said softly. She nodded. Tao what? He exhaled. If we go public with that data, it'll ignite a firestorm. Powerful figures will come after us. But thousands of trafficking victims could be saved if Interpol intercepts that network. Billions in dirty money would be seized. A knot formed in V's stomach. She thought of Luca and his insatiable thirst for that fortune. We promised my mother we'd do the right thing. Dante's eyes flickered. There's no going back, Valentina. Once we do this, we become targets for every corrupt official and cartel on that list. She stepped closer, near enough to sense the grief and resolve beneath his stoic mask. I'm tired of living in the dark. If it means risking everything to end their power, so be it. His breath caught. I never wanted to drag you into this. She placed a hand on his cheek, surprising them both with the tenderness of the gesture. You didn't drag me, Dante. I walked into your life with a purpose. Maybe we can carry this burden together. For a brief moment he rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. Then he straightened, bearing any trace of vulnerability. We'll leak the data. Gabriel can help us set up secure channels. A pounding on the door snapped their attention away. V quickly returned the microchip to its compartment, shutting the mirror's frame. Dante drew his gun, nodding for V to stay back. He cracked the door open. A wild-eyed woman burst in, one of their local informants. Her name was Gianna, an ex-Marchetti courier. Panting, she gasped, "They're coming, Luca's men. They've tracked you here." V's gut clenched. How far? Gianna wiped rain from her face. Maybe 5 minutes behind me. Dante cursed under his breath. We need to move. Ravenna can't travel far in her condition. V met his gaze, heart hammering. We'll have to make a stand or find a way out fast. Gabriel emerged, face grim. I can buy us time, set up a decoy. But we can't stay here. Ravenna called from the other room, voice strained. Just leave me. I'll hold them off. Dante's jaw tightened. Not an option. In the lull, thunder rumbled again as if Sicily itself braced for the confrontation. They'd barely escaped the carnage at the opera house and already the storm closed in. V turned to the mirror, a sense of dread and urgency flooding her veins. We can't let them get the relic or the data inside it. Dante nodded, determination blazing in his eyes. This ends tonight. One way or another. Chapter 16. The bakery below the safe house had 2 exits. A front door leading to a narrow street and a back door opening to a cramped courtyard. Gabriel scouted the area, confirming both routes were compromised by Luca's incoming men. No easy escape. Ravenna lay on the wooden table, biting back groans as Dante carefully extracted the bullet from her shoulder using sterilized tweezers. V assisted, holding a flashlight steady. Blood slicked the table. Outside, the distant roar of approaching vehicles magnified the tension. Gabriel sprinted into the room. They're here. We can hold them at the courtyard for a few minutes, but not much longer. Ravenna hissed in pain as the bullet emerged. Dante staunched the wound with gauze. Done, he murmured. Then he looked at Ravenna, eyes softening with something akin to concern. Can you walk? She forced a nod, though sweat beaded her brow. You forget who you're talking to, boss. V helped Ravenna to her feet. We'll need to move quietly. But fate gave them no such chance. A thunderous crash reverberated from the shop below. Doors kicked in, shouts echoing. Within moments, footsteps pounded on the stairs. Dante handed V the mirror with its hidden microchip. Protect this. No matter what. She clutched it, heart racing. Ravenna switched off the overhead light, plunging the room into near darkness. They pressed against the walls, guns drawn. The door burst open. A masked gunman charged in, scanning for targets. Ravenna, biting her lip against the pane, fired first. One shot to his leg. He toppled with a scream. Another figure emerged behind him. Dante dispatched that one with lethal precision. Gunfire roared in the cramped space. V knelt behind the upturned table, returning shots when she could. The muzzle flashes lit the room like lightning. In the chaos, a voice cut through, cold and mocking. Sorella. Where are you? V's blood ran cold. Luca. He was here personally. She exchanged a glance with Dante, who grimaced. Gabriel hissed from behind a counter. There are too many. We need an exit strategy. Dante scanned the room. The courtyard. Let's go. They fell back, firing to cover one another. Ravenna's face contorted with pain, but she moved on adrenaline. Gabriel smashed a side window with his elbow, letting them slip onto a narrow balcony. Below lay the courtyard, barely visible in the moonlight. Shots rang out, chiseling chunks of plaster from the wall near them. Dante climbed down a drain pipe, calling V to follow. She handed the relic down first, anxious not to damage it. But as she began descending, Luca's voice shouted from the shattered window, "There you are." A shot grazed V's arm, hot pain slicing through her flesh. She bit back a scream, nearly losing her grip. Dante caught her from below, helping her drop to the courtyard. Ravenna and Gabriel followed, landing awkwardly. Ravenna nearly collapsed but forced herself upright. They sprinted for the courtyard gate, only to find more men waiting. A brutal firefight ensued. Bullets sparked against brick and V's ears rang with the relentless barrage. The relic felt heavy in her grasp, as if it carried all the centuries of blood spilled for its secrets. Dante tackled one thug to the ground, his gun clattering away. V turned in time to see Luca appear at the courtyard entrance, face twisted with fury. He raised his weapon, aiming at Dante's back. Time slowed. V didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, firing a single shot at Luca's arm. He screamed, dropping his gun. "Enough," she shouted, voice raw. The courtyard fell into a stunned hush, each side taking stock of casualties. Luca clutched his bleeding arm, hatred burning in his eyes. "You'll shoot your own brother?" V's hands shook. "You threatened everything, our mother's sacrifice, the relic, me." He spat on the ground. "You chose him over me, this man who works for the Marchetti family, the people who destroyed our lives." Ravenna and Gabriel kept the remaining thugs at bay, guns trained. Dante rose, breathing hard, blood trickling from a cut on his brow. He said nothing, letting V handle this confrontation. Eyes locked on Luca, V advanced. "I did what I had to do. You let vengeance and greed consume you." He sneered, cradling his wounded arm. "I only wanted what was ours. Fatherless, motherless. We had nothing. Then you vanished, leaving me in a foster home. Now you march in here playing the hero?" Pain tore through her chest. Guilt, anger, sorrow. "I was a child, Luca. I ran cons to survive. I tried to come back for you, but..." She broke off, voice cracking. "I'm sorry, truly. But you're killing people for money, for pride." His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "We could have done this together. Yet you side with the Marchettis. You're no sister of mine." Behind them, sirens howled again in the distance, closing in. It was only a matter of time before the entire place swarmed with corrupt cops or worse. V's grip on the gun tightened. She recalled all the times she'd lamented not saving Luca from the darkness that swallowed him after their mother's supposed death. This was the final betrayal, the moment that sealed their fate on opposite sides. Luca's hand inched toward a backup pistol holstered at his waist. V saw the movement, heart twisting. "Don't," she pleaded. But his hand closed around the weapon, eyes wild. "You're not better than me. You're just playing a different con." Time froze. In a split second, V realized he intended to shoot Dante, or her, before the night ended. She squeezed her trigger. The shot rang out. Luca staggered, a crimson bloom spreading across his chest. He collapsed to his knees, choking on a ragged breath. V's vision blurred with tears. She rushed to him, ignoring Dante's warning shout. Luca glared up, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Never cared," he rasped. V cradled his head, tears scorching her cheeks. "I did. I'm sorry. Please." Luca tried to speak again, but only a weak cough emerged. Then his eyes fluttered shut. The last bit of life drained from his face. A hollow hush fell. V gasped, heart hammering like a bird in a cage. She felt Dante's hand on her shoulder, gentle and hesitant. The courtyard was awash in the scent of gunpowder and blood. Ravenna limped forward, pressing a hand to her own wound. Gabriel lingered, scanning for more threats, but the men who'd followed Luca were either dead or fled. V bowed her head over Luca's still form. All the cunning, the cons, the hatred. This was how it ended, in a dark Sicilian courtyard under the pounding rain. She realized with searing clarity that vengeance was never the real answer. Revenge had led them all here, to a final betrayal that claimed Luca's life. Dante's voice was hoarse. "We have to go." V swallowed hard, tears mingling with the rain. She rose, leaving Luca's body behind, the weight of her choice carving a hollow space in her soul. They still had the relic, still had a mission. But the cost had proven higher than she'd ever imagined. Chapter 17. They retreated under cover of night, navigating Sicily's winding coastal roads. Vi felt numb, haunted by the sight of Luca's final breath. In the back seat of a hastily acquired SUV, she clutched the relic with trembling hands. Dante drove, jaw clenched in grim focus. Beside him, Gabriel scrolled frantically on a tablet, searching for a secure channel to leak the relic's data. Ravenna lay stretched out across the rear bench, fresh bandages stained with her blood. She'd lost a troubling amount but insisted she'd pull through. At Dante's direction they returned to Isabella Costa's hidden villa, desolate, quiet and far from prying eyes. When they arrived, Isabella rushed out with a small lantern, worry etched across her face. She took one look at Vi and gasped. "You're hurt." Vi touched the dried blood on her forearm, wincing. "Just grazed." "Luca." Her voice cracked, the rest of the sentence dying on her lips. Isabella's gaze flicked to Dante, who shook his head in silent confirmation. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes, but she only said, "Let's get you inside." They carried Ravenna into a spare bedroom and laid her on a bed. Isabella retrieved a box of medical supplies, assisting with gentle hands. Meanwhile, Gabriel holed up in a side room, hooking up his laptop to the relic's microchip. Vi hovered in the doorway, exhaustion pressing on her like a lead blanket. The adrenaline that had fueled her was gone, leaving only raw grief. She wanted to collapse. Instead she forced herself to join Gabriel. He glanced at her, concern in his eyes. "I'm sorry about your brother," he said quietly. "Ravenna filled me in." She nodded, not trusting her voice. Then she focused on the code flashing across Gabriel's laptop screen. "Is that the trafficking list?" Gabriel tapped a few keys. "Not just a list. Bank accounts, shipping routes, contact logs. It's a goldmine of evidence implicating half the known underworld. Politicians in major countries, CEOs of major companies. It's staggering." Vi's hands shook. "We have to leak it. All of it." Gabriel gave her a grim look. "Once this goes live, every name on this list will want our heads." She lifted her chin, eyes blazing. "So be it. We're done living in fear." He nodded, then began the uploading process through an encrypted Tor network, aiming to route the data to reputable journalists and law enforcement agencies. "I'll keep it anonymous as long as I can. But expect blowback." Vi let out a shuddering sigh. "Right now I don't care." Downstairs, Dante found Isabella in the living room, her grief-touched expression revealing she already knew the basics of what had happened. She sank into a worn chair, hands trembling. "My son," she whispered. "Gone." Dante wanted to offer comfort, but his own guilt weighed heavily. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick. "I failed you. I tried to save them both, Valentina and Luca." Isabella looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. "You saved me once, but I couldn't save Luca from himself." A lightning flash illuminated the windows. The storm had followed them from Palermo, or perhaps it was the same storm raging all along. Isabella's gaze hardened. "End this. Make sure no more children lose their parents. No more families are torn apart." Dante bowed his head. "Gabriel is leaking the data as we speak. With luck, it will bring the syndicate's entire network crashing down." Isabella rose, crossing to a small wooden chest. She opened it, revealing a dusty envelope. "This should have been given to Vi long ago." He held it out to Dante. "My will in case I ever truly died. It also includes instructions for an escape route should you need it. Take her far away when the dust settles." He accepted the envelope, feeling the weight of her words. "I will." Vi's breaking point. An hour later, Vi stepped outside to the villa's courtyard, seeking solitude. The rain had subsided to a light drizzle. She stood by the low stone wall overlooking the moonlit sea. Each breath felt heavy. She heard a shuffle behind her and turned to see Isabella approaching, cane in hand, eyes brimming with sorrow. "Figlia mia, I wish I could take this pain from you." Vi squeezed her eyes shut. "I didn't want to kill him, Mom." Isabella rested a hand on Vi's arm. "He gave you no choice." Tears welled up again and Vi let them fall. "All these years I blamed the Marchettis. But Luca, he made his own path." Isabella's voice wavered. "And yet I can't help but feel responsible." My fight against the syndicate set everything in motion. I never meant for him to be lost in vengeance. V turned to her. You did what was right. Exposing the traffickers was worth it, even if everything else fell apart. A muffled explosion from inside the villa made them both jump. More precisely, a loud crash. Heart-thudding, V rushed in, expecting another ambush. Instead, she found Ravenna on her feet, swaying precariously. She had knocked over a side table in her attempt to stand. Easy, Dante murmured, supporting Ravenna's arm. You need rest. Ravenna shot him a glare. I'm not going to die in bed while you all fight the final battle. V exhaled a shaky breath. We're safe here. Gabriel's already broadcasting the intel. We'll end this with the truth. A haunted look crossed Ravenna's face. What about Alessandro's loyalists? The 5 families are scattered, but some remain. They'll want blood. Dante set his jaw. Let them come. Soon their finances will be seized and their safe houses compromised. We'll drive the final nail into the Marchetti empire. A short silence fell, broken by Isabella's hoarse whisper. Then do it quickly before they strike back. Burn it all down, once and for all. V and Dante exchanged a solemn glance. The relic's data was already out there. The unstoppable chain reaction had begun. Soon, law enforcement would raid the syndicate's strongholds worldwide. Rival criminals might retaliate. The old mafia power structures would crumble, but not without bloodshed. As lightning flickered outside, V glimpsed her mother leaning heavily on the cane, shoulders trembling. A wave of protectiveness overwhelmed her. Isabella had endured too much already. 15 years of hiding, heartbreak over Luca. Quietly, V resolved that after tonight, no matter what it took, she and Dante would ensure Isabella's safety. Even if that meant faking another death. Somewhere in the villa, a clock chimed the early hours. They stood together in the dim lamplight, battered but resolute. The final act loomed. Chapter 18. Morning broke with a leaden sky. Tension vibrated through the villa. Nobody rested well after the night's violence. Gabriel's hacking success had triggered a cascade of global arrests, but now the 5 families, remnants of Alessandro Marchetti's old empire, were scrambling to retaliate. V and Dante gathered in a small drawing room, a table strewn with weapons. Ravenna hovered, pale but determined, arm in a sling. Isabella sat nearby in a rocking chair, hands folded, anxiety etched into her features. We move now, Dante announced. The 5 families will convene at an estate outside Palermo, trying to salvage what's left of their power. We crush them there. Ravenna's eyes narrowed. And by crush you mean? Demolish, Dante said, voice like steel. We'll confront them with the truth. Show them their funds are gone, their leaders indicted. Let them tear each other apart. If they refuse to stand down, we end them. V's gut twisted. More bloodshed. But she also understood that the syndicate wouldn't simply dissolve upon receiving a polite memo. They'd sooner kill everyone involved and salvage scraps of power. Isabella interjected softly, I'm coming with you. I can make them listen, remind them what they've done. Dante shook his head. Too dangerous. They'd put a bullet in you before letting you speak. But Isabella's frail voice held iron resolve. They already took my life once. I have nothing left to lose. A tense silence lingered. V's eyes met Dante's. They both recognized the finality in Isabella's tone. All right, Dante relented. But we do this carefully. The 5 families gathering. Late afternoon shadows stretched across the estate's courtyard. The building was a sprawling mansion with high walls, guarded by grim-faced men. V, Dante, Isabella, Ravenna, and Gabriel arrived in 2 cars, passing through a security gate where the guard recognized Dante's signature ring, Alessandro's heir come to negotiate. Inside, tension suffused the air. Several key lieutenants of the 5 families stood in clusters, muttering anxiously. They threw venomous glares at Dante, some spat curses at the mere sight of him. Word of the data leak had spread and many suspected Dante's hand in it. A wiry man in a tailored suit stepped forward, Adriano Bianchi, one of the few remaining old guard leaders. His eyes flicked to Isabella with confusion. Dante, who is this woman? Dante answered with measured calm, Isabella Costa, once marked for death by my father. Now here to show you the cost of your sins. A ripple of shock, even fear, passed among them. Some recognized her name, Isabella, the journalist who once threatened to expose them. She raised her chin, voice trembling but resolute. You all built fortunes on trafficking human lives. My children and I suffered. Many others died. But now your empire stands on the brink of collapse. Another mafia boss, Salvatore Russo, sneered. Marchetti, you betray your own blood for what? A woman's vendetta? Dante's left hand trembled almost imperceptibly. I betrayed nothing worth saving. My father's empire was rotten. I choose to atone by tearing it down. A wave of anger surged among the family's men. One brandished a gun, stepping forward with a snarl. Then you die with it. Ravenna stepped in with swift precision, pressing her own pistol to the man's temple. Lower your weapon unless you want your brains on the floor. Chaos threatened to erupt, but Adriano Bianchi raised both hands. Everyone calm down. We can settle this without gunfire. He turned to Dante. Surely you don't expect us to roll over because of some leaked files? Dante's voice was ice. Interpol is already moving on your bank accounts, your front businesses. By tomorrow you'll be fugitives. This is your last chance to walk away. Leave the life behind. If you continue fighting, you'll die. Bianchi's lip curled. Big talk from a man who dares stand here with only a handful of allies. Gabriel held up a phone, tapping the screen to show incoming alerts. You're already indicted, Bianchi. Try traveling anywhere and you'll be arrested. A hush fell. The families were cornered and they knew it. Furious muttering broke out, some men looking ready to run, others eager for a last stand. V's heart hammered. She felt Isabella's hand slip into hers, cold with fear. They won't surrender easily, Isabella whispered. Sure enough, Salvatore Russo spat. Then we take as many of you down with us as possible. He fired a shot at Dante. Time seemed to slow. Isabella reacted on instinct, shoving Dante aside. The bullet tore into her chest. V screamed as Isabella staggered, blood blooming across her blouse. Ravenna and Dante retaliated instantly. Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing through the mansion's ornate columns. Shouts, screams, splintering wood. It was pandemonium. V cradled Isabella, pressing a shaking hand over the wound. Blood pulsed out, warm and terrifying. Mom, hang on. Isabella's lips parted, breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She touched V's cheek with trembling fingers. Don't let it be for nothing. Tears blinded V. We won't. We'll finish this. A final hail of gunfire rattled the air. Ravenna and Dante made short work of the panicked mafia lieutenants. Some men dropped their weapons and fled. Others lay motionless, blood pooling on the marble floors. Bianchi cowered behind an overturned table, surrendering at the sight of Ravenna's gun aimed between his eyes. When the shooting ceased, Dante rushed to V's side. He saw Isabella's ashen face and felt sorrow tighten his throat. Isabella. No. She looked at him, eyes fluttering. For everything, she murmured, voice barely audible. V clutched her mother's hand, tears streaming. Isabella's gaze drifted to the dust-laden beams overhead. Her breath slowed, then ceased. A numbness enveloped V. Isabella, the reason for all her vengeance and heartbreak, was dying in her arms a second time, but this time for real. Outside, sirens drew near. The final blow to the 5 families had been struck. V trembled, pressing her forehead to Isabella's still warm cheek. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Dante knelt beside them, his hand resting on V's shoulder. The monstrous empire Alessandro had built was burning around them, crumbling under the weight of the truth they'd unleashed. But Isabella's life slipped away, the cost of their crusade. In the end, she had sacrificed herself for Dante's redemption, for V's closure. A mirror of the old sacrifice that once saved Isabella, only now reversed. V closed her mother's eyes, tears scorching her cheeks. The sirens grew louder, the stench of gunpowder hung thick, and the blood-spattered marble floors glistened with the remnants of a criminal reign. It's over, Dante whispered, voice hollow. V gazed at the wreckage, at the body of her mother. Not yet, she said, the weight of sorrow forging her resolve. We still have to disappear, like ghosts. Dante nodded, remembering Isabella's final wish that he take V away, safe from the inevitable aftermath. The old life had died here in this blood-stained mansion. A new one beckoned, unwritten, uncertain, but theirs to claim. Chapter 19. A gray drizzle blurred the Sicilian coastline as Valentina Costa stood in the church courtyard, black veil drawn over her eyes. The funeral procession for Isabella Costa was subdued, attended by a handful of villagers who barely knew her, Gabriel and Ravenna in discreet mourning clothes, and Dante at V's side, hands folded, gaze distant. The church bells tolled, echoing through the damp air. In a simple casket draped with white lilies lay the woman who had died to expose the truth. The 5 families had been obliterated, but the cost was Isabella's blood, and the guilt weighed heavily on everyone, especially V. V's fingernails bit into her palms. We're burying her again, she thought, recalling that horrifying day 15 years ago when she'd first believed her mother was dead. Now it was final. A priest led a short service, his voice low against the patter of rain on cobblestone. V barely registered the words. Her chest felt hollow the way it had when she pulled the trigger on Luca. The 2 people she had loved most in the world, gone, sacrificed on the altar of truth. After the final prayers, Dante placed a single white rose on the casket. As he straightened, he caught V's eye. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice thick with regret. She only nodded, numb. "Sorry doesn't undo any of this," she wanted to say. But she swallowed her anger. Dante might be the only person left who understood the weight of her grief. Her vendetta had brought her here, and yet it was also Dante's crusade that had made a chance for redemption possible. When the mourners dissipated, Gabriel approached under a black umbrella. Interpol's begun seizing assets across Europe. The press is in a frenzy. Official statements say the Marchetti empire is finished. Ravenna joined them, her sling hidden beneath a dark shawl. The bullet wound in her shoulder had not stopped her from attending. "There's a rumor," she added, voice hushed, "that certain powerful politicians want to retaliate. They see you both as a threat." V gave a bitter laugh. "Of course they do. We just blew up half their financial networks." Dante's jaw tensed. "We'll lie low. Let them assume I've lost everything. There's a way to cement that impression." He paused meaningfully, meeting V's eyes. He understood. Faking his death. 4 months, he'd hinted at a plan to vanish once his goal was complete, to leave no trace for the vultures to chase. Now was the time. Gabriel frowned. "You mean stage your assassination? That would leave a power vacuum wide open." Ravenna snorted, half in amusement, half in pain. "Power vacuum? The empire's already in ruins. Why not blow up the last few pieces?" V's chest twisted with a surge of determination. "Let's do it. Dante Marchetti dies, and every last holdout from Alessandro's regime scrambles for control. Meanwhile we disappear." Dante inclined his head, resolve firm. "Yes. It ends here. We'll feed them one final lie." He turned to V, rain sliding down the planes of his face. "We'll need to be convincing. The rest of the criminal world must believe you've turned on me, or that you're the final blow to the Marchettis. Then we slip away together." She swallowed, recalling how she once dreamed of killing him for revenge. Now she'd be acting that out, only this time as an elaborate con to destroy the last vestiges of the syndicate. "All right," she said quietly. "When?" Dante exhaled, shoulders relaxing as though relieved. "Soon. We'll arrange an event where word spreads that the Marchetti heir still lives. The few remaining loyalists and rival kingpins will show up, hoping to carve out territory. That's when we do it. A funeral in the rain. A planned assassination." V gazed at the fresh grave. "We bury you, Mom, and we bury the old ghosts too." The part of her that wanted vengeance had been overshadowed by the part that needed closure. Maybe this final ruse would allow both. She touched the casket softly, whispering a goodbye. Then she stood, eyes on Dante. "We do this and never look back." A solemn nod passed between them. Under the weeping sky, the 2 conspirators, once enemies now bound by shared guilt and a fierce need to atone, sealed their pact. The storm clouds above reminded them that the world they left behind was dark, that escape would require cunning and ruthlessness. But they were liars after all, and the greatest trick was yet to come. Chapter 20. Under cover of night, V and Dante returned to a former Marchetti stronghold, a palatial villa near Palermo that once hosted lavish parties for the underworld's elite. Now it stood nearly abandoned, the staff and security having fled after the data leak. A perfect stage for the final act. In the grand ballroom, dusty chandeliers and tattered drapes bore silent witness to the downfall of a criminal empire. Ravenna, Gabriel, and a skeleton crew of trusted mercenaries moved through the space, setting up hidden cameras and rigging explosives along structural weak points. The plan was straightforward. Gather the remaining loyalists and greedy opportunists, let them see Dante, then enact the staged assassination that would trigger chaos, and bury the syndicate for good. V paced across the marble floor, her heels echoing ominously. She was calmer than she expected. The con is everything, she reminded herself, just like 1,000 smaller scams she'd pulled. But this time the stakes were life or death, for them and for countless potential victims of the trafficking rings. Dante entered, adjusting the collar of his dark suit. A faint tremor flickered in his left hand, a reminder of old guilt. He caught her gaze. "We'll send out the invitations through the usual channels. Word will spread that I'm calling a final meeting to reorganize. Curiosity alone will draw them." V nodded. "We have to make it believable that you want to rebuild the empire. Then I'll do my part, shoot you in front of them, maybe as payback for Luca." She forced herself not to flinch at the memory of her brother's last moments. Dante's expression was grim. "And once I'm presumed dead, Ravenna triggers the explosives. The place collapses and any holdouts are forced to flee or die. The 5 families are already decimated, but we'll scatter any stragglers who think they can pick up the pieces. No new boss emerges from this rubble." He swallowed hard. "Where does that leave us?" For a moment the shadows under his eyes softened. "Free if we're lucky." She managed a tight smile. "We've both lost so much. Let's make sure this means something." They moved to the side of the room where Gabriel hunched over a crate filled with prop weapons and bullet squib rigs. He'd prepared a special rig that would simulate a fatal gunshot, a technological improvement on the stage blood Dante used to fake Isabella's murder so long ago. Gabriel held up a custom-made pistol loaded with blank cartridges. "Shoot him center mass, the squib rig will explode blood packs." Very convincing. "Just don't aim at his head. We can't replicate that visually." V exhaled. "Right." In the confusion he sneaks out a side exit to a hidden passage. Ravenna detonates the charges and I escape amid the chaos. Everyone else will assume Dante's gone. A million things could go wrong. One stray bullet from a trigger-happy gangster, one misfire of the rig, one guard noticing the exit plan, and the entire ruse would collapse. But they had no choice. The vestiges of the syndicate would forever chase Dante, or attempt to resurrect the Marchetti name, unless they believed he was truly dead. Night deepened. V retreated to a corner and scrolled through her phone. No messages, which was good. It meant no unforeseen new threat. Yet dread gnawed at her. She felt the weight of everything. Her mother's death, Luca's blood on her hands, the betrayal still fresh in her mind. Dante approached quietly, voice low. "Once this is over, we run. I'll have passports ready, courtesy of Gabriel. We'll skip the country, Morocco maybe. Or anywhere they won't expect us." She glanced up, meeting his eyes. "And if they do expect us?" His lips twisted into a half-smile. "Then we'll play another con. This is what we do, right?" She let out a shaky laugh. "Yes. I suppose it is." A moment of quiet understanding passed between them. Both broken, both lethal, yet clinging to each other like 2 sides of the same blade. Outside, the moonless sky pressed in as if the darkness itself approved of their plan. "Tomorrow," Dante murmured, "it all ends." V nodded, steeling herself. "Tomorrow I shoot my husband in front of the last monsters of this empire. And then maybe they could step out of the shadows for good." Chapter 21. They called it a Requiem Gala. Officially, Dante Marchetti was hosting a final memorial for Alessandro Marchetti, complete with fine wines and black attire, an odd blend of funeral and celebration to lure in the desperate remnants of the criminal underworld. Word spread like wildfire through back channels. The late Alessandro's formidable son was rising from the ashes to rebuild. V dressed in a sleek black gown, reminiscent of mourning but with an edge of menace. She pinned her hair up, leaving her neck bare to display the faint scar earned from a near-fatal con years ago. "A warning to anyone who dares cross me," she thought grimly. "I'm no victim here." By midnight, the palatial villa glowed with candlelit chandeliers and gilded fixtures. Ravenna oversaw a small retinue of mercenaries disguised as waitstaff. Gabriel orchestrated security cameras from a hidden control room, awaiting the signal to jam external communications and trigger the explosives. Attendees trickled in, Small-time mafia captains, ex-syndicate enforcers, a few corrupt officials hoping to salvage personal profit. They mingled in hushed tones, uncertain whether to fear or court Dante. Some recognized V as the rumor-stirring Costa widow, who'd allegedly lost her brother and mother in the violent unraveling of the empire. She offered them icy politeness. From across the ballroom, Dante locked eyes with her, a silent question. She inclined her head, letting him know she was ready. The entire evening felt like a macabre dance, everyone wearing masks of civility while tension thrummed in the air. Eventually, Dante took to a small stage set up at the head of the room. The hush that fell was electric. Glasses halted mid-sip, whispers died. In that moment, V's pulse thundered. It's time. Clinking a fork against his champagne flute, Dante addressed the crowd in a low, commanding voice. My father built an empire on blood and secrets. Many of you profited from those days. Now, external forces, Interpol, the media, certain traitors, threaten to dismantle everything. But tonight, I offer a chance to rise anew. A ripple of anticipation. V glanced at Ravenna, who stood discreetly by a pillar, her right hand concealed behind her back, likely gripping a firearm. All pieces in place. I propose an alliance, Dante continued, to reclaim the wealth stolen from us and expand into new territories. A lie but an enticing one. Hungry eyes gleamed among the crowd. He paused, letting the tension build. Yet betrayal still lingers. Some here may question my loyalty. Others may question my intentions. Let's settle that now. He raised his glass, scanning the room. That was her cue. V stepped forward, gown trailing like a widow's shroud. She climbed onto the stage, standing at Dante's side, staring out at the gathered criminals. Her heart pounded. Any mistake here and we're both dead. With theatrical poise, she spoke, voice resonating. You all know who I am. Valentina Costa, forced into marriage with Dante Marchetti, bearing the weight of my family's blood. I've watched the Marchettis destroy everything I loved. And I've waited. Murmurs spread. This was the wedge. The tension soared as she turned, leveling a pistol at Dante's chest. A few guests gasped. Others smirked, anticipating more blood. Dante didn't flinch. His stoic posture never wavered. The stage lights gleamed on her gun barrel. She felt the press of the rig beneath his suit, right where she needed to aim the blank. One shot, one perfect illusion. She snarled, letting raw emotion fuel her performance. You orchestrated my mother's death. My brother's downfall. And you dare stand here speaking of new empires? Her voice rose with genuine bitterness. Dante locked eyes with her, silent acceptance in his gaze. He took one step forward. Then kill me, amore. And it. V's finger squeezed the trigger. A thunderous crack split the air. Crimson spray erupted across Dante's chest as the squib rig detonated. He staggered backward, dropping his champagne glass, eyes wide in feigned shock. Gasps and shouts erupted from the onlookers. Several drew weapons, uncertain if this was a coup or a meltdown. Time seemed to slow. Dante collapsed to the stage floor, blood spreading across his white shirt, eyes rolling back. He went limp. V's breath caught in her throat, her own shock mingling with relief that the rig fired properly. Chaos ignited. Some guests dove for cover, others rushed the stage. V pivoted, pointing her pistol at anyone who dared approach. Stay back, she screamed, letting the tears streak her face, an authentic anguish that mirrored her performance. In the confusion, Ravenna triggered the next phase of the plan. Explosive charges along the villa's supports began to blow in precise sequence. Boom, boom, boom. Chandeliers crashed, sending shards of glass raining down. Pillars cracked, spitting dust. Pandemonium reigned. Figures dashed for the exits, colliding in blind panic. V lingered just long enough to appear distraught, as if she truly had no exit plan. Then she sprang from the stage and melded into the stampede. She caught a glimpse of Dante's dead form sliding off stage into a hidden trapdoor that Gabriel had prepared. He's alive, she reassured herself. Has to be. More blasts rocked the villa. Sections of the ceiling collapsed in fiery bursts. The floor quaked beneath her heels. Smoke choked the air, forcing her to cough. She ran for a side corridor where she knew Ravenna waited. Sure enough, the assassin guided her through a warren of passages, ignoring the terrified men and women scrambling in all directions. Debris fell around them, flames leaping from shattered candelabras. At last they burst into a service tunnel at the rear of the estate. Gabriel stood waiting with a small flashlight, panting, gun in hand. "Dante," he shouted over the infernal roar. V's heart seized. "I saw him disappear, but did he make it?" A shadow emerged from the smoke. He stumbled, partially covered in soot, the fake blood from the squib darkening his shirt. Relief swept V as she rushed to him, ignoring the acrid taste of smoke in her lungs. He coughed, gripping her arm. "Let's go. This place is coming down." As the final blasts rocked the villa, the four of them fled through the tunnel. Screams echoed behind them, a testament to the criminal empire's last stand dissolving in flames. V allowed herself one final glance back at the swirling chaos. The downfall of the Marchetti name, the last ghosts of Alessandro's legacy. Dante Marchetti died here tonight, she told herself, and so did Valentina Costa. They were free to become someone else. Someone better or worse, so long as they were far from this ruinous world. With a shared look of determination, they vanished into the night. Chapter 22. They called it a Requiem Gala. Officially, Dante Marchetti was hosting a final memorial for Alessandro Marchetti, complete with fine wines and black attire, an odd blend of funeral and celebration to lure in the desperate remnants of the criminal underworld. Word spread like wildfire through back channels. The late Alessandro's formidable son was rising from the ashes to rebuild. V dressed in a sleek black gown, reminiscent of mourning but with an edge of menace. She pinned her hair up, leaving her neck bare to display the faint scar earned from a near-fatal con years ago. "A warning to anyone who dares cross me," she thought grimly. "I'm no victim here." By midnight, the palatial villa glowed with candlelit chandeliers and gilded fixtures. Ravenna oversaw a small retinue of mercenaries disguised as waitstaff. Gabriel orchestrated security cameras from a hidden control room, awaiting the signal to jam external communications and trigger the explosives. Attendees trickled in, small-time mafia captains, ex-syndicate enforcers, a few corrupt officials hoping to salvage personal profit. They mingled in hushed tones, uncertain whether to fear or court Dante. Some recognized V as the rumor-stirring Costa widow, who'd allegedly lost her brother and mother in the violent unraveling of the empire. She offered them icy politeness. From across the ballroom, Dante locked eyes with her, a silent question. She inclined her head, letting him know she was ready. The entire evening felt like a macabre dance, everyone wearing masks of civility while tension thrummed in the air. Eventually, Dante took to a small stage set up at the head of the room. The hush that fell was electric. Glasses halted mid-sip, whispers died. In that moment, V's pulse thundered. "It's time." Clinking a fork against his champagne flute, Dante addressed the crowd in a low, commanding voice. "My father built an empire on blood and secrets. Many of you profited from those days. Now, external forces, Interpol, the media, certain traitors, threaten to dismantle everything. But tonight, I offer a chance to rise anew." A ripple of anticipation. V glanced at Ravenna, who stood discreetly by a pillar, her right hand concealed behind her back, likely gripping a firearm. "All pieces in place. I propose an alliance," Dante continued, "to reclaim the wealth stolen from us and expand into new territories." A lie, but an enticing one. Hungry eyes gleamed among the crowd. He paused, letting the tension build. "Yet betrayal still lingers. Some here may question my loyalty. Others may question my intentions. Let's settle that now." He raised his glass, scanning the room. That was her cue. V stepped forward, gown trailing like a widow's shroud. She climbed onto the stage, standing at Dante's side, staring out at the gathered criminals. Her heart pounded. Any mistake here and we're both dead. With theatrical poise, she spoke, voice resonating. "You all know who I am, Valentina Costa, forced into marriage with Dante Marchetti, bearing the weight of my family's blood. I've watched the Marchettis destroy everything I loved. And I've waited." Murmurs spread. This was the wedge. The tension soared as she turned, leveling a pistol at Dante's chest. A few guests gasped. Others smirked, anticipating more blood. Dante didn't flinch. His stoic posture never wavered. The stage lights gleamed on her gun barrel. She felt the press of the rig beneath his suit, right where she needed to aim the blank. One shot, one perfect illusion. She snarled, letting raw emotion fuel her performance. You orchestrated my mother's death. My brother's downfall. And you dare stand here speaking of new empires? Her voice rose with genuine bitterness. Dante locked eyes with her, silent acceptance in his gaze. He took one step forward. Then kill me, amore. And it. V's finger squeezed the trigger. A thunderous crack split the air. Crimson spray erupted across Dante's chest as the squib rig detonated. He staggered backward, dropping his champagne glass, eyes wide in feigned shock. Gasps and shouts erupted from the onlookers. Several drew weapons, uncertain if this was a coup or a meltdown. Time seemed to slow. Dante collapsed to the stage floor, blood spreading across his white shirt, eyes rolling back. He went limp. V's breath caught in her throat, her own shock mingling with relief that the rig fired properly. Chaos ignited. Some guests dove for cover, others rushed the stage. V pivoted, pointing her pistol at anyone who dared approach. Stay back, she screamed, letting the tears streak her face, an authentic anguish that mirrored her performance. In the confusion, Ravenna triggered the next phase of the plan. Explosive charges along the villa's supports began to blow in precise sequence. Boom, boom, boom. Chandeliers crashed, sending shards of glass raining down. Pillars cracked, spitting dust. Pandemonium reigned. Figures dashed for the exits, colliding in blind panic. V lingered just long enough to appear distraught, as if she truly had no exit plan, then she sprang from the stage and melded into the stampede. She caught a glimpse of Dante's dead form sliding off stage into a hidden trapdoor that Gabriel had prepared. He's alive, she reassured herself. Has to be. More blasts rocked the villa. Sections of the ceiling collapsed in fiery bursts. The floor quaked beneath her heels. Smoke choked the air, forcing her to cough. She ran for a side corridor where she knew Ravenna waited. Sure enough, the assassin guided her through a warren of passages, ignoring the terrified men and women scrambling in all directions. Debris fell around them, flames leaping from shattered candelabras. At last they burst into a service tunnel at the rear of the estate. Gabriel stood waiting with a small flashlight, panting, gun in hand. Dante, he shouted over the infernal roar. V's heart seized. I saw him disappear, but did he make it? A shadow emerged from the smoke. He stumbled, partially covered in soot, the fake blood from the squib darkening his shirt. Relief swept V as she rushed to him, ignoring the acrid taste of smoke in her lungs. He coughed, gripping her arm. Let's go. This place is coming down. As the final blasts rocked the villa, the four of them fled through the tunnel. Screams echoed behind them, a testament to the criminal empire's last stand dissolving in flames. V allowed herself one final glance back at the swirling chaos. The downfall of the Marchetti name, the last ghosts of Alessandro's legacy. Dante Marchetti died here tonight, she told herself, and so did Valentina Costa. They were free to become someone else. Someone better or worse, so long as they were far from this ruinous world. With a shared look of determination, they vanished into the night. Chapter 23. Night cloaked the Marrakesh rooftops as a faint moon glimmered overhead. V and Dante crept through the tight alleyways, guided by the same street urchin who delivered the ominous note. The boy insisted he'd been hired again to bring them to a location at the outskirts of the Medina. V suspected a trap, but ignoring the invitation would only embolden their enemy, whoever Al was. The boy led them to a secluded courtyard behind a crumbling building once used as a tannery. The stench of animal hides lingered in the air, mingling with rotting vegetation. A single lantern glowed, casting long shadows. V's skin crawled. It felt like stepping onto a stage in a horror play. Dante's hand hovered near his concealed pistol, senses taut. V carried a compact 9mm in her jacket pocket, heart thrumming with adrenaline. If Luca truly walked among the living, she had to see it with her own eyes, or put him down for good. I shot him once. I can do it again. They emerged into the courtyard, scanning the gloom. No sign of movement. The boy scurried away, possibly spooked. V stepped forward, determined to confront the phantom who'd summoned them. Suddenly, a figure slid from the shadows. A tall man with burn scars across his left cheek. Definitely not Luca. A mocking grin curved his lips. Dante Marchetti. Valentina Costa. Or do I call you Samira now? His voice was thickly accented, Middle Eastern perhaps. V's hand tightened around her gun. Who are you? He shrugged lazily. Call me Lawson. I've been contracted to bring you in, or kill you. His eyes danced with dark amusement. The note was just a ruse to ensure your compliance. My employer thought a message signed L might lure you out. V's stomach lurched. So it wasn't Luca. But relief was short-lived. They stood before a contract killer hired by some powerful new enemy. Possibly a politician from the trafficking list, or a spurned member of the old syndicate. Dante's voice was cold. Who hired you? Lawson smirked. A certain senator from the United States whose dealings you exposed. He's lost a fortune and wants your heads. He tapped the burn scar on his cheek. Pays well enough to mend old wounds. V's mind raced. She recalled the multinational nature of the data leak, names of politicians spanning continents. One senator in particular had funded clandestine operations. They're hunting us all the way here. Lawson raised a pistol. No need to draw this out. A bullet apiece and I collect my fee. Any last words? Dante's lips tightened. Just two. He moved faster than V had ever seen, pivoting to fire in one smooth motion. But Lawson dove aside, returning fire. The courtyard exploded in muzzle flashes and roaring echoes against stone walls. V dropped to a knee, aiming carefully at Lawson's silhouette. The assassin was agile, rolling behind a stack of crates. She fired, splintering wood. Sparks flew, but he remained unscathed. Dante flanked to the right, trying to corner Lawson. The assassin launched a barrage of shots, one clipping Dante's upper arm. He hissed in pain, stumbling behind a broken fountain. Adrenaline spiked in V's veins. She had to end this quickly. She shifted position, hooking around the courtyard's perimeter to catch Lawson from behind. Her footsteps were light on the cobblestones. Closer, closer, she saw the glint of Lawson's eyes scanning for Dante in the gloom. Raising her gun, she fired twice. Lawson spun, a bullet catching his side. He grimaced, dropping to one knee. Desperate, he hurled a knife at V, missing by inches. She advanced, weapon trained on his head. His breath came ragged, a grim laugh escaping. You think killing me ends this? I'm just one hound. The senator will send more. She hesitated, recalling all the death behind her. Luca, Isabella, countless men in Sicily. Could she spare him, question him, maybe glean more intel? Dante emerged from cover, blood trickling down his arm. His gaze hardened. We don't need more intel. We already know they'll come. V nodded, swallowing a knot in her throat. He pulled the trigger. Lawson's body fell limp against the crates, eyes vacant. Another life taken, another stain on her conscience. But there was no time for regret. Dante pressed a hand to his bleeding arm. We need to leave the city, tonight. V knelt, checking Lawson's pockets. She found a phone. A quick glance revealed a single message from an encrypted number. Confirm kill or stand by for extraction. It sent a shiver down her spine. She crushed the phone beneath her heel. We're not safe here anymore. The old dream of living quietly in Morocco was shattered. The shadow of retaliation had found them, and it would keep finding them wherever they went. Dante's gaze flicked toward the alley. Then we keep moving. We'll do what we always do, adapt, vanish. Even as fear clenched V's chest, she felt that familiar surge of resolve. They'd chosen this path of exposing evil and saving others. That meant endless enemies. We'll handle them, she vowed silently. We've faced worse. Together they melted into the night, leaving Lawson's body cooling on the courtyard's worn stones. The ghosts of their past might forever chase them, but they'd meet every challenge with bullets and cunning. This is who we are, V told herself, liars, survivors, consequences. Chapter 24. A year passed. A swirl of false passports and coded transactions let Dante and V slip from one safe harbor to the next. Tangier, Lisbon, Casablanca, even fleetingly in Bangkok. Each time they set up short-term bases to shelter those who escaped trafficking pipelines. Survivors who needed sanctuary, false papers, or a quick exit to safer lands. In quiet ways they tried to atone. Inside a dimly lit safe house on the outskirts of Casablanca, V peered through the barred window at the deserted street. They had just finished escorting 2 women from Eastern Europe to a rescue organization. Outside, a battered sign for a tailor shop gave them an inconspicuous front. She glanced over her shoulder at Dante, who was dismantling a pistol on a makeshift workbench. Despite the constant threat, they had found an odd sense of purpose, turning the leftover millions once hoarded by the Marchetti empire into a lifeline for those still caught in the trafficking web. V felt a pang remembering Isabella's sacrifice. She'd be proud, V thought, that we're using the relic's stolen fortune to fight the same horrors she once exposed. She closed her eyes briefly, summoning that memory as a kind of solace. A faint buzzing sound made her check her phone. Gabriel's encrypted line showed a single message. All quiet on my end. Keep going. So the chain of safe houses was still holding, no immediate threats discovered. Good. He turned to Dante. Looks like we're clear for now. He nodded, wiping gun oil off his hands. The faint tremor remained in his left fingers, a ghost of guilt that never fully left him. Yet she saw how his eyes had softened over the last year, not so tormented by his father's legacy, more driven to ensure no one else suffered it. They had formed a small but fierce network of ghost safe houses, each one run by people who owed V and Dante a debt or shared their cause. The world believed Dante Marchetti was dead, and Valentina Costa had faded into rumor. That anonymity was their greatest weapon against the powers that still wanted them destroyed. In the hush of the safe house, a sense of calm settled. V moved to Dante's side, placing a hand on his shoulder. He tilted his head toward her, their shared warmth a quiet acknowledgement of the bond forged through blood and betrayal. They might never be a normal couple, but they were alive, fighting for something beyond themselves. She picked up the freshly cleaned pistol, checking the slide. So this is it, she asked softly. An endless chain of safe houses, forging new IDs, taking down traffickers where we can? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Did you have another dream in mind? She thought of the sea in Sicily, the orchard behind her mother's old villa. Maybe one day they'd settle again, but not yet. Not while so many men like Lawson or unscrupulous politicians could still exploit the weak. And not while we both carry these scars. Maybe someday, she said, voice quiet. But not now. In a single graceful movement she slid a bullet into the gun, racked the slide and locked eyes with Dante. A flash of memories passed between them. Betrayals, illusions, the relic, the final bullet that took Luca's life, the rigged bullet that took Dante's. He rose to his feet, a faint smirk curving his lips. Outside, the neon glow of a nearby cafe sign flickered, casting shadows across his face. We should check the next route soon. If the senator's hounds track us here. She finished his thought with a grim nod. We move on. New ghosts in a new city. A pause, then they both let out a dark little laugh at the absurdity of it all. V clicked the pistol's safety on, turning away. But Dante caught her wrist gently, pulling her back. There was a heat in his gaze, a reminder of how close they'd grown during endless nights of watching each other's backs. We keep going, Amore, until there's nothing left to fight. Or until we're gone, he said softly. V pressed her forehead to his, eyes drifting shut. We're not saviors, she whispered, acknowledging the harsh reality of their methods. The cons, the blood spilled, the manipulations they still employed. Dante brushed a hand along her jaw, voice a low murmur. No, he agreed, his tone carrying the weight of everything they'd done, everything they'd lost. Were consequences. She felt the corner of her mouth lift in the faintest, most dangerous smile. In a life forged by lies and vengeance, they could still choose who they saved, and who they destroyed. They stood there, together, two battered souls entwined, guns and ghosts their constant companions. And in the quiet gloom of that safe house on the edge of a city that would never truly know them, their final vow was sealed. They would never stop being who they were, liars, lovers and liberators. The end. Kindly like and subscribe for more free audiobooks updated weekly. Thank you. If you want to support the channel, please do well to use the Patreon link in the bio.